The night air smelled like wet concrete and hot metal. Annie January landed hard on a rooftop edge and caught herself with both hands. Her boots scraped. Her heart was still racing from the chase. Sirens echoed below, mixing with shouting and the sharp click of phones taking pictures. "Smile for the cameras, Starlight," someone yelled from the street. Annie did not smile. She looked down instead. 2 blocks away, a man with a gun had tried to rob a corner store. Annie had stopped him. Fast. Clean. No one got hurt. That part was good. The part that never felt good was the rest. A big screen on the side of a building replayed the moment again already. Her face, her light, her name in bold letters, like she was a product on a shelf. Annie's jaw tightened. She turned away from the screen. A rooftop door slammed open behind her. A young PR worker in a tight suit leaned out, panting. "Annie, your angles were great. If you come down, we can get you in front of—" "No," Annie said, simple and flat. The worker blinked like he didn't understand the word. "But the sponsors, I saved people," Annie said. "That's the job." She stepped back from the door, eyes scanning the skyline. The city lights were bright. Too bright. It made her skin itch with old memories of stage lights and fake smiles. Then the air changed. At first it was just a sound, not a boom. More like a deep hum, as if the world itself had a wire pulled tight inside it. Annie froze. A thin, white-blue line opened in the sky above the next building. It looked like a crack, but it moved like water. The edges shimmered. The light was wrong. It did not look like anything she knew. The PR worker stared up, mouth open. "Is that supposed to be?" Annie did not wait. She ran and jumped for the next roof. Her body moved on hero instinct. Her hands hit the concrete, and she pushed forward, eyes locked on the crack. The hum grew louder. Her teeth buzzed. Annie reached for the nearest power source by habit, like taking a breath. She pulled from the rooftop lights, the billboards, the lines running through the walls. The energy slid into her like heat into cold hands. Her skin glowed. Her eyes lit up. "Hey!" she shouted to the PR worker without looking back. "Get inside, now!" A gust of air slammed across the roof. The crack in the sky widened. The light spilled out in a sheet. Annie felt it grab her, like a giant hand wrapping around her ribs. She planted her feet and grabbed a metal antenna. She pulled more power, trying to anchor herself. The antenna bent. The force did not care. Annie's boots lifted. Her stomach dropped. Her grip tore free. For one breath, she saw the city below. Cars like toy blocks, people like dots, screens flashing her face. Then, the white-blue light swallowed everything. There was no sky. There was no ground. There was only brightness and pressure, like being pushed through a narrow tunnel made of lightning. Annie tried to scream, but the sound felt like it got ripped away from her throat. Then, she fell. Cold air slapped her face. Her body dropped fast. Below her was a wide street packed with people, trains in the distance, tall buildings with signs in a language she did not understand. Japan. Her brain tried to name it even as she fell. Annie threw her arms out and pulled power without thinking. She reached for the city. It answered. Electricity rushed into her from 1,000 places at once. Streetlights, store signs, phones, trains, buildings. The surge hit her too hard. Every screen nearby flickered. A whole block went dark. People screamed. Annie's glow flashed bright. For a split second, she hung in the air like a falling star that refused to fall. Then the power dipped. She dropped again, slamming into the street on one knee, one hand down. Concrete cracked under her palm. Cars swerved. A delivery truck skidded sideways. A metal street sign above her shook loose from its bolts and started to fall toward a crowd. Annie's head snapped up. "No!" she yelled. She snapped her hands forward, and released a tight burst, more push than blast. The air popped. The falling sign jerked sideways and slammed into the side of a building instead of the people. A mother yanked her child back, eyes wide. The truck kept sliding. It was headed straight for the sidewalk. Annie spun, grabbed a handful of power from a nearby traffic box, and fired a flash so bright it turned the street white. The driver's eyes squeezed shut. The truck's wheels locked. It screeched to a stop inches from the curb. The flash faded. People stared at her like she was a monster or a miracle. Some lifted phones. Some ran. Some just froze. Annie stood up slowly and raised her empty hands, palms out. Her breathing was loud in her ears. "I'm not here to hurt you," she said, voice rough. "Please, get back. Give me space." A small boy had fallen in the panic. He was crying, looking for his father. Annie stepped toward him carefully. The streetlights around her blinked again, like the city was nervous too. "Okay," Annie muttered under her breath. "Not the time." A scarf shot through the air like a snake. It wrapped around her wrist. Annie's body snapped into a fighting stance. A man in dark gear stood on a nearby roof edge, eyes half-lidded, hair messy, expression tired, but sharp. He held the scarf like it was a weapon made of steel. His gaze pinned her. Annie felt the message without words. Don't move. Don't try anything. Above them, something shadowed the street. A winged figure circled high, fast, watching. And on the ground, people kept filming, whispering, yelling. Annie's glow faded down to a faint shimmer. Her eyes flicked from the scarf to the man's face. "Who are you?" she asked. The man did not answer right away. He looked at the dead street lights, the broken sign, the cracked pavement. Then he spoke in calm Japanese, words Annie could not understand. He saw the blank look on her face. His eyes narrowed. "Not local," he said in slow English, like he was testing each word. "Hands. Where I can see." Annie lifted both hands higher. Okay. The boy's crying cut through the noise. Annie's eyes softened. "There's a kid." The man's scarf tightened a little, warning her. Annie swallowed her anger. She forced herself to breathe. She forced herself not to pull power again, because she could feel it. The whole street was full of electricity, full of fuel. If she panicked, the blackout would spread. People could get hurt. So Annie did the hardest thing. She stayed still. The winged man landed lightly on a streetlight that flickered once, then steadied. He was blonde, smiling a little too easily, but his eyes stayed focused. "Wow," he said in English. "That was a big entrance." The tired man kept his scarf ready. "Hawks," he said, without looking away, like the name meant something. Hawks. Annie held the word, filed it away. Then the tired man's eyes changed. They sharpened like a knife. "Tell me," he said, "are you a villain?" Annie stared at him. Her mouth wanted to say 100 things, but she remembered the cameras, the lies, the way people used labels like chains. She chose the truth. "I'm a hero," Annie said. Or, "I was. I don't know where I am." The man did not relax. He simply blinked, and his eyes locked harder on her face, like he was trying to shut something off. Annie waited for her glow to die. It didn't. Not fully. A faint light still clung to her skin, like heat that would not cool. The tired man's eyebrows twitched. His power, whatever it was, had not worked the way it should. Hawks's smile vanished. "That's not normal." Annie felt her stomach drop. Across the city, far away in a hidden room full of screens, a shadowy figure watched the live footage and tilted his head. A calm voice, almost amused, spoke into the dark. "Interesting," it said. "A light that does not belong." Aizawa moved first, because that was how he survived. When the reports hit his phone, it looked like a normal street incident at first. Lights out. Panic. A crash. Then the next line. Unknown glowing woman. And then, a blurry video clip from a bystander. Aizawa saw the flash. The push. The clean control that kept people alive. Not random, not sloppy, but also not safe. He arrived in minutes. Now he stood with his scarf tight. Watching her breathing and her hands, and the way her eyes kept checking the crowd. She was thinking like a rescuer. That was a point in her favor. But she had just drained a city block's power by accident. That was a point in the other direction. Hawks landed and talked like he always did, like the world was one big conversation he could steer. Aizawa didn't have that luxury. He blinked again, focusing his quirk. If she had a quirk, it should shut off. It didn't. Not fully. Aizawa felt the edge of real concern. He kept it off his face. "Can you understand me?" he asked. She nodded. "Yes." "Name," Aizawa said. Her lips parted. She hesitated for half a second, like saying it out loud might start a problem. "Annie," she said. "Annie January." Aizawa stored it. Not public. Not yet. "Where are you from?" Annie's eyes went distant, like she was looking at another city in her head. "Not here." Hawks leaned in, friendly. "So you're lost? That's okay. We can help." Annie's stare snapped to Hawks. Her shoulders stiffened. "I've heard that before." Aizawa noticed that. She's been trapped by helpers. He glanced at the crowd. Too many phones. Too many cameras. "Clear the area," he ordered into his earpiece. Other heroes moved civilians back. Aizawa stepped closer, keeping distance from her hands. "Annie," he said, using her name on purpose. "You're coming with us. We will keep you safe, but you follow instructions." Annie's chin lifted. "Am I under arrest?" Aizawa kept his voice steady. "Not if you don't make it that." Annie looked past him at the crying boy. Aizawa followed her gaze. The child's father pushed through the crowd, face pale, grabbing the boy and hugging him hard. The kid stopped crying. Annie let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. "Okay," she said quietly. "I'll come. But I'm not signing anything." Hawks laughed once, like it was a joke, but his eyes stayed serious. "You're going to fit right in." Annie gave him a look that said, "I don't want to fit in. I want to do what's right." Aizawa's scarf loosened a fraction. "Good," he said. "Move." As they walked, every few steps, a lamp nearby flickered and died. Annie cringed each time. Hawks whispered, amused, "You got a thing with lights, huh?" Annie muttered, "I'm working on it." Aizawa didn't smile, but he did think, this is going to be complicated. UA High looked like a school that had learned how to survive a war. High walls, strong gates, cameras, quiet layers of safety. Annie was led through secure halls into a room that felt like a cross between a classroom and a hospital checkup space. Clean floors, bright lights, a table, a big window made of thick glass, 3 chairs. Annie sat, arms folded, eyes scanning exits. Aizawa stayed near the door. Hawks leaned against the wall like he belonged anywhere. Then the smallest figure in the room entered with the biggest calm. A white-furred animal in a suit walked in on 2 legs, holding a tea tray with tiny cups. Annie blinked. "Is that a—" The animal smiled. "Principal Nezu, welcome." Hawks waved like this was normal. "Hey, boss." Aizawa nodded once. "Nezu." Annie stared, trying not to show how shocked she was. Her world had weird things. This still hit different. Nezu set the tray down. "Tea?" Annie stared at the cups. She did not reach for them. Nezu didn't push. He sat across from her, folding his hands. You appeared in the middle of Musutafu and caused a sudden power outage in a wide area, Nezu said in careful English. But you also prevented injuries. That suggests you are not here to harm civilians. Annie's mouth tightened. I didn't mean to shut anything down. I believe you, Nezu said. Aizawa's eyes narrowed slightly. He didn't say anything. That was his way of watching. Nezu tilted his head. You called yourself a hero. Annie nodded once. Yes. In our country, Nezu continued, many people are born with special abilities called quirks. Heroes are trained and licensed. They work with rules. Annie's gaze sharpened. Rules are fine. Ownership is not. Nezu's smile stayed polite, but his eyes were sharp. You have been owned. Annie's silence answered him. Hawks tried to soften it. Hey, we're not like… Annie cut him off fast. I don't know what you're like. Aizawa's voice finally came in, flat. Smart. Annie looked at him. She saw the tiredness in his face, the kind that came from carrying too much. Nezu tapped his fingers together. We will ask you a few questions. You may refuse to answer, but that may limit how we can help you. Annie took a breath. Ask. Nezu asked simple things first. Where she came from, how she got here, what she remembered. Annie kept it clean. She did not talk about Vought by name. Not yet. Not to people she didn't trust. She gave the truth in short pieces. A different world, she said. A city full of lights. A crack opened. It pulled me in. Nezu nodded. And your ability? Annie hesitated. She didn't like talking about her power like it was a show. But she also didn't want these people guessing wrong. I can absorb electricity, she said. I can store it for a bit. Then I can release it as light or force. Nezu's ears twitched. So your strength changes based on what is around you. Yes, Annie said. If I'm near a lot of power, I'm stronger. Aizawa spoke again. And if you're not? Annie's eyes lifted. Then I'm still not helpless. Aizawa looked like he respected that answer. Nezu leaned back. We would like to test this ability. Safely. Annie's stomach tightened. Tests. Labs. People in suits. No needles, she said instantly. Nezu nodded at once. Agreed. Aizawa pushed off the wall. You move when we tell you. You stop when we tell you. Annie met his gaze. If someone's in danger, I move. Aizawa didn't blink. Then we'll make sure no one is in danger. Hawks grinned. Teamwork. Love it. Annie did not smile, but she did stand. They walked her into a training area with thick walls and a wide floor. It looked like an arena meant for learning without dying. A row of generators sat behind protective glass on one side, like a zoo for electricity. Nezu stood behind a safety line with Aizawa and Hawks. Two teachers Annie didn't know watched from further back. A group of students had gathered at a distance. Annie could tell they were trying not to stare. One boy with messy green hair stared anyway, eyes bright like he was watching a legend. One blonde boy with sharp eyes glared like he wanted to fight the air itself. A half-and-half-haired boy watched quietly like he was measuring the room. Annie ignored them at first. Start with low power, Nezu said. A technician flipped a switch. A small panel lit up, feeding a limited amount of electricity into a controlled line. Annie stepped forward and held her hands near the line without touching it. She took a slow breath. Then she reached. She could feel it. The flow. The hum. The warmth that wasn't heat. The energy slid into her like water into dry soil. A soft glow rose from her skin. The students gasped. The green-haired boy whispered something excited to a classmate. Annie kept her focus. She raised her hand and released a gentle flash toward a target dummy. The light hit like a camera burst on steroids. The dummy's sensors beeped. Again, Nezu said. Annie pulled a bit more and released a second burst, this time with force behind it. The air cracked. The dummy slid backward across the floor. The blonde student's grin flickered onto his face for half a second, then vanished. Like he hated that he liked it. Aizawa watched Annie's posture and breathing. He didn't care about the light show. He cared about control. Nezu's voice stayed calm. Now, please stop absorbing. Annie stopped. Her glow faded down, but not all the way. Aizawa's eyes narrowed. He stepped forward and looked straight into her eyes. Don't move, he said. Annie froze. Aizawa activated his quirk. He watched for the normal sign. The drop. The shutting off. Annie's faint glow stayed. Not strong, but present. Aizawa's scarf tensed slightly, like it could feel his thoughts. Nezu's smile remained, but his tail flicked once. That is unusual. Annie swallowed. What did you do? Aizawa's voice stayed even. I cancel quirks. Annie stared at him. And it didn't work. It didn't work fully, Nezu corrected gently. Which means either your ability is not a standard quirk, or it functions differently. Annie's stomach sank and lifted at the same time. Different meant risk. Different meant attention. Different meant being hunted. Hawk spoke, softer now. Hey, that doesn't mean you're bad. It just means we need to be careful. Annie looked past them at the students again. The green-haired boy looked worried now, like he could sense she was scared. Annie didn't like that. She didn't want kids feeling the fear she knew too well. She forced her shoulders down. She forced her voice steady. I can control it, she said. Most of the time. As if to prove her point, a ceiling light above her flickered and died. A few students jumped. The blonde boy barked. See? She's unstable. Annie's face flushed. I said most of the time. Hawks laughed under his breath. Okay, that was kind of funny. Aizawa gave Hawks a look that said, not helpful. Nezu's eyes stayed on Annie. You did not choose this, but now you are in a world where powerful abilities can change society quickly. Some people will want to help you. Some will want to use you. Annie's eyes hardened. I know. A door opened at the far side of the training floor. The students shifted, suddenly respectful. A tall man walked in with a presence that felt like sunlight. He smiled wide, warm, and bright, like the world was safe when he was near. All Might. Annie didn't know his name yet, but she felt what he was. A symbol, a living promise. He stopped at a distance, not pushing into her space. He raised a hand in a friendly wave. Hello, he said, in English, that sounded practiced, but strong. I heard you arrived in a frightening way. Annie watched him carefully. Her chest felt tight. This was the kind of hero people put on posters. This was the kind of hero Annie used to be forced to pretend to be. All Might's smile softened. You protected civilians before you protected yourself. That matters. Annie's throat worked. She didn't trust easy praise. You don't even know me, she said. All Might nodded. True. But I know the choice you made on that street. You could have run. You stayed. Annie looked down, then back up. Running didn't help me in my world. All Might's eyes changed for a split second. The smile stayed, but something behind it looked older, like he understood pain. Aizawa spoke from behind Nezu. We're still testing. All Might nodded. Of course. He took one careful step closer, still respectful. May I ask your name? Annie hesitated. She could feel the students listening, the cameras, the system already starting to form around her. She gave the smallest piece of truth. Annie, she said again. All Might placed a hand over his chest, like a vow. Annie, I am All Might. I will do what I can to keep you safe. Annie almost laughed, not because it was funny, because it sounded like the start of a trap, and because part of her wanted to believe him anyway. Before she could answer, Nezu's phone chimed, then Aizawa's, then Hawk's. Aizawa read the message. His face didn't change, but the room got colder. Hawks's smile turned thin. Ah, that's fast. Nezu set his phone down with careful calm. The Hero Public Safety Commission wishes to meet our guest. Annie's shoulders stiffened. Who? Aizawa's voice was flat. The people with the most rules. All Might's smile held, but his eyes sharpened. Be cautious, Annie. Annie exhaled through her nose. Her glow pulsed once, not from power, but from emotion. And 2 more lights overhead died, like they couldn't handle her mood. Bakugo scoffed loudly from the student group. She's literally breaking the school. Annie snapped a look at him. I'm not doing it on purpose. The green-haired boy stepped forward a bit, voice soft but steady. Kachan, stop. Aizawa's scarf twitched. Students out, he ordered. Reluctantly, they backed away. Annie watched them go. Kids, real kids, not child soldiers trained for cameras. That mattered. Nezu's voice stayed gentle. Annie, we will not force you to sign anything today, but we will need an agreement about safety while you are here. Annie folded her arms again. I'll follow safety rules. I'll help if there's danger. I won't let you turn me into a brand. Hawks tilted his head. That's a weird thing to say in a hero school. Annie looked him dead in the eyes. In my world, it was normal. Aizawa didn't comment. He just watched her like he was building a plan in his head. Nezu nodded. Then we begin with trust. Small steps. All Might's voice warmed the room again. A hero's first step is often the hardest. Annie wanted to roll her eyes. Instead, she took a breath and said, Fine. Small steps. Outside the training hall, the wind rattled a window. Somewhere far away, in a hidden place full of hands and screens, Tamura Shigaraki leaned close to a monitor showing Annie's glowing face. His fingers twitched. Bring her to me, he hissed. Behind him, a calm voice answered. Smooth as a knife that didn't need to hurry. Yes, All for One said, but not with force first. He watched Annie absorb power on the screen. He watched the lights die around her when she tensed. He smiled. We will offer her what she wants, he said. And then, we will see what she is willing to trade. The first blackout hit 2 days later. Not a big one. Not like the street where Annie landed. This time it was 3 blocks near an industrial area. Streetlights out. A few traffic signals dead. People complaining online. Aizawa stood in the UA staff room with coffee that had gone cold and eyes that had not. He watched the live updates on a screen. Too clean, he muttered. Nezu sat across from him, reading reports. The pattern is intentional. Hawks perched on the back of a chair, like a bird that never rested. So someone is playing. All Might stood near the window, arms crossed, looking out at the city. His smile was gone. His face looked serious. Aizawa's phone buzzed again. Now it was bigger. Power outage at a substation. Reports of smoke. A train delayed. People stuck in elevators. Then the real problem. A hospital nearby switched to backup power. Aizawa's eyes narrowed. They picked a place where panic spreads fast. Nezu's voice stayed calm, and where Annie would feel responsible. All Might turned. We must protect civilians first. Hawk stretched his wings. And protect Annie from being used. Aizawa stood up. We do both. They moved fast. Annie was already suited up when Aizawa found her in the hallway near the exit, shoulders tight, jaw clenched. She had heard the alarms. She had seen the screen. Her eyes flicked to Aizawa. "I'm going." Aizawa didn't argue. He just pointed. "With us, and you follow orders." Annie's mouth tightened. "If people are trapped, I'm not standing around." "You won't," Aizawa said. "You'll move when we move." Hawks landed beside them, grin back in place like a mask. "Road trip." Annie gave him a look. "Do you ever turn it off?" Hawks winked. "Nope." All Might stepped into the corridor behind them. His presence filled the space even before he spoke. "Annie, remember, the goal is to save lives, not to win a fight." Annie's eyes flashed with something sharp. "I know." And she did. That was why it hurt so much. Because when she arrived in this world, she had promised herself she wouldn't become part of another machine. But people in elevators did not care about machines. They just wanted to breathe. They reached the edge of the blackout zone, and the city looked wrong. Not ruined, not destroyed, just dim. Store signs were dead. Traffic lights blinked on backup. People stood in the street, confused, some angry, some scared. Emergency workers tried to direct cars with flashlights. Annie felt the lack of power like a missing limb. In her world, she could always find a glow somewhere, a billboard, a stadium, 1,000 bright things begging to be drained. Here, it was dark. Her power still lived in her, like a battery half full, but she could feel the limit. She swallowed. Hawks rose into the air, feathering out his wings. "I'll scout." Aizawa tugged his scarf into position. "Stay close, Annie." Annie nodded, eyes on the nearest building. People were pressed against windows, looking down. A woman leaned out from a fourth-floor balcony, shouting in Japanese. Annie didn't understand the words, but she understood the fear. Aizawa pointed. "Elevator trapped. 2 people. Fire team is on the way, but the shaft is unstable." Annie's body moved before her thoughts finished. She ran to the building entrance, shoulders low, hands ready. The lobby was dim, lit by emergency lights. Someone had pried open the elevator doors on the ground floor a few inches. A voice from above called for help. Annie looked up into the shaft. It was a dark throat. She could smell hot wires. Aizawa grabbed her arm. "Don't climb. If your light blinds them, they might slip." Annie nodded once, jaw tight. "I can do small." She reached into herself and pulled the stored power up into her hands. A soft glow formed, not a blast, like a strong flashlight. Controlled. She aimed it upward and angled it to the side, lighting the shaft without hitting eyes directly. "Hello," she called. "Stay still. We're getting you out." A scared voice answered in broken English. "Please, please!" Annie's stomach twisted. She stepped onto the elevator cables carefully and climbed, using her light to see. The walls were close. She could hear her own breathing. She hated this kind of tight space. Halfway up, she saw the elevator car stuck between floors, tilted. 2 people inside. A man holding a woman's hand. Annie's glow brightened just enough for them to see her. The woman cried in relief. "Angel, I'm not," Annie said, voice firm. "I'm a hero. Hold still." She hooked her fingers around the top edge of the car and tested its weight. It was heavy. Too heavy to lift without more power. Annie's eyes flicked toward the dark city outside. No easy energy. She could still do it, but it would drain her. Aizawa's voice echoed up from below. "Annie, report." "It's tilted," she called back. "I can stabilize. I need a strap." Aizawa tossed up a capture line with precise aim. It landed in Annie's hand. Annie looped it around the elevator frame and the cable, making a tight harness. She didn't yank. She did it in steps, smart and slow. Then she used a short burst, more push than blast, just enough to straighten the car. The metal groaned. The car leveled. The trapped man gasped. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Annie said. "Climb out when I tell you." She guided them onto a maintenance ledge, one at a time, speaking in clear, simple words, even though their English was shaky. They made it. Annie exhaled hard. As she climbed down, the emergency lights in the lobby flickered twice and stayed on. For once, she didn't kill them. She almost smiled. Then Hawks's voice crackled in her earpiece. Aizawa," Hawks said, tone less playful. "We've got company." Annie stepped out into the street again. She felt it before she saw it. A cold pressure in the air. Across the road, smoke rose from the direction of the substation. Not a normal fire, something more violent. People ran. Then a dark fog rolled in like a curtain opening. A tall figure stepped out of it, face hidden, body moving like a quiet ghost. A warp gate. Annie's skin tightened. Aizawa's voice turned sharp. "Kurogiri." Hawks hovered above, feathers ready. Annie didn't know the name, but she understood the danger. The fog moved wrong, like it didn't belong. Another gate opened, and another. Aizawa's eyes narrowed. "They're splitting the area." Annie's heart hammered. This wasn't a random attack. This was a plan. A loud crash hit from the direction of the substation. A wave of dust rolled down the street. And then she saw him. A pale man with messy hair and a hand-like shape on his face stepped forward, hunched like a creature that hated its own skin. He stared at Annie like she was a prize. His voice was rough, angry, and thrilled. "There," he said in Japanese, then in broken English, like he was forcing the words. "Light. Girl." Annie's stomach dropped. Aizawa moved in front of her without thinking. His scarf snapped out. "Don't touch anything," Aizawa said, voice deadly calm. The pale man smiled like it hurt. "Touch is the point." Annie took one slow step back, eyes locked on his hands. Her mind ran fast. He wants close range. "Don't let him close." Her glow rose, small and tight. Hawks called from above. "Civilians are still in the buildings. We can't go full blast." Annie's jaw clenched. "Then we go smart." Aizawa didn't look at her, but his voice lowered. "Good." Kurogiri's fog thickened. A gate opened behind Annie. Aizawa's scarf snapped back like a whip, blocking it. "Stay with me," he ordered. Annie kept her breathing steady. Then a shadow dropped from above. A monster, huge, muscles like a moving wall, dead eyes, mouth open too wide. Nomu. Annie's body tensed. She had fought strong people before, monsters too. But this one felt built for war. The Nomu lunged at Aizawa. Aizawa's eyes flared with his quirk. "Now!" Annie released a flash, aimed not at the heroes, but at the Nomu's face, bright enough to disrupt, not bright enough to blind everyone around. The Nomu jerked, eyes narrowing, confused for a split second. Aizawa used that split second like a weapon. His scarf wrapped the Nomu's arm and yanked it off balance, pulling it away from the crowd. Hawks sent a storm of feathers down like darts, pinning the Nomu's legs to the pavement. Not deep, not killing, just control. Annie felt the fight rhythm click into place. But the pale man, Shigaraki, wasn't watching the Nomu. He was watching Annie. He stepped forward, slow, hands flexing. Annie backed up, keeping space. A streetlight near her blinked out. She muttered, "Stop it," under her breath, like she was talking to herself. Shigaraki tilted his head. "You break lights. I break everything." He lunged. Annie jumped back and fired a concussive burst toward his chest. The blast hit him like a hammer of air and light. It should have thrown a normal person through a wall. Shigaraki slid back instead, boots scraping, one hand digging into the ground to stop himself. He looked up, smiling wider. "Oh," he breathed. "That's fun." Annie's eyes narrowed. "You're sick." Shigaraki's voice turned sharp. "I'm honest." He threw a handful of debris from the ground, chunks of broken concrete, like fast rocks. Annie flashed again, lighting the debris midair and blasting it apart into dust. But dust was what Shigaraki wanted. The air filled with gray. Annie's light cut through it, but it also reflected back, making glare. Her vision stung. Aizawa grabbed her shoulder. "Don't overflash. You'll blind yourself." Annie swallowed, blinking hard. "Got it." She shifted tactics. Smaller bursts, lower angles, light behind her, not in front. Shigaraki rushed again. Using the dust as cover, Aizawa stepped forward, eyes locked. His quirk hit Shigaraki. For an instant, Shigaraki's body stiffened. Annie didn't waste it. She fired a tight blast at Shigaraki's feet, cracking the pavement and forcing him to stumble back. Hawk swooped low, feathers forming a barrier between Shigaraki and the fleeing civilians. "Evac route is still open," Hawk shouted. Aizawa's voice stayed firm. "Hold them here. Keep the street clear." Annie glanced toward the substation. Smoke, sparks, dark. A terrible thought hit her. If they destroyed the substation, the area will stay dark. And if it stays dark, I stay weaker. It was a trap. Shigaraki seemed to read it on her face. He smiled again, ugly and pleased. No power. No shine. Annie's anger flared, and with it, 3 more building signs died in a row, popping out like dying stars. Hawks actually laughed once, even in the chaos. "Okay, you really do that when you're mad." Annie shot him a look. "Not now," Aizawa snapped. "Focus!" Annie forced her breathing slow. Then she made a choice. She turned and sprinted toward the substation. Aizawa's scarf lashed out, trying to catch her, but he stopped himself. He trusted her just enough. "Don't get isolated!" he shouted. "I won't!" Annie yelled back. She ran past panicking civilians, past firefighters, past a police line forming fast. The closer she got, the more she felt it. A deep hum under the ground. Not dead, not fully. Backup lines, emergency routes, stored energy in thick cables. Annie pushed through a broken fence and into the substation yard. Metal towers rose like tall skeletons. Sparks snapped. Smoke drifted. A few villain goons were here, pulling equipment, laughing, trying to keep the area unstable. Annie didn't slow. She raised both hands and released a wide flash that washed the yard in white. The goons screamed and turned away, hands over faces. Annie didn't hit them again. She ran past them to the main generator room. The door was half crushed inward, like someone had tried to rip it apart. Annie stepped through. Inside, the air smelled like burning plastic and hot copper. Warning lights blinked weakly on backup. And there it was. A massive power unit, still alive, still feeding emergency lines. Annie stood in front of it. Her chest rose and fell fast. If she pulled too much, she could crash hospital backup power. If she pulled too little, she couldn't stop Shigaraki. She needed control. She closed her eyes and listened to the flow, like listening to a river. Then she took only what she could take without starving the rest. It still felt like grabbing a thunderstorm. Her body lit up bright. Her hair lifted slightly with static. Her eyes shone like twin lamps. She turned and sprinted back out into the yard. The moment she stepped outside, the streetlights on the road flickered back on, one by one, as if the city itself took a breath. Civilians gasped and pointed. Annie shot back into the street like a comet, not because she wanted drama, but because she was fast when she had fuel. Aizawa and Hawks were still holding the line, but the Nomu had broken free of some feathers, and Shigaraki had moved closer to the crowd. Annie landed between them with a hard crack of pavement. Aizawa's eyes flicked to her glow. You found power?" Annie nodded. "I was careful." Hawks whistled. "That's a lot of careful." Shigaraki's smile twitched. "There she is." Annie raised her hands. Her voice was low and steady. "You're not getting past us." Shigaraki leaned forward like a dog about to bite. "We'll see." He rushed. Annie did not flash big. She flashed smart. A tight burst aimed at the ground in front of him, making a wall of dust shoot up. But then she lit the dust from behind, turning it into a bright screen that ruined his depth judgment. Shigaraki stumbled, eyes narrowing. Annie used the moment to fire a concussive blast that hit him in the chest and sent him sliding back across the asphalt. Not defeated, not broken, but stopped. Aizawa moved in with his scarf, trying to bind Shigaraki's arms without letting him touch fabric or skin. Hawk's feathers formed a net above, ready to yank civilians away if needed. The Nomu roared and charged Annie now, drawn to the strongest thing on the field. Annie pivoted and met it with a blast that shook windows. The Nomu skidded back, heels carving lines in the street. It didn't fall. It was built to take hits. Annie's eyes widened. "Okay, big guy." She took a step back, then launched upward with a burst under her feet, gaining height to keep distance. The Nomu jumped too, faster than something that big should move. Annie's mind snapped into problem-solving mode. He's strong and fast. Don't trade punches. Control his sight. Control his direction. She flashed in short pulses, like strobe lights, making it hard to track her exact position. Then she hit the Nomu from the side with force, knocking it down into an empty bus lane. Hawk shouted, "Nice!" Aizawa's eyes stayed locked on Shigaraki, keeping his quirk active as long as he could without blinking. Shigaraki growled, frustrated now. "Kurogiri!" A warp gate opened behind Annie, silent, hungry. Annie felt it and spun, releasing a blast into the fog. The blast distorted the gate's edge, like pushing a curtain with wind. But it didn't close. Aizawa's scarf snapped around Annie's waist and yanked her back, saving her from stepping into it. "Eyes up!" Aizawa barked. Annie nodded, breath hard. "Thanks." Shigaraki's gaze flicked to Aizawa. His smile returned, colder. "You're annoying." He lunged at Aizawa instead. Annie reacted instantly, firing a flash right at Shigaraki's face. Not huge, not cruel, just enough to make him flinch and turn his head. Aizawa used that tiny opening to slide away, scarf snapping. The fight held. But Annie could feel the truth. Shigaraki wasn't trying to win clean. He was testing, learning her limits, learning how she moved. And somewhere, someone was watching through screens. A loud voice boomed down the street. "Enough!" A tall figure appeared at the far end of the block. All Might. Civilians cried out, half relief, half panic. Shigaraki's body froze for a fraction of a second, like his instincts screamed. Then he laughed, sharp and ugly. Perfect timing. Always the show. All Might surged forward, fast and overwhelming, like the air itself wanted to follow him. Annie's heart jumped. He's that strong. The Nomu roared and shifted toward All Might, drawn like a magnet. All Might hit it with one heavy strike that cracked the street and sent the monster flying backward. But Annie noticed something important. All Might's breathing. The smallest hitch, the tiniest strain. A secret weakness hiding under the smile. Aizawa noticed it too. He always noticed things. Shigaraki's smile widened again, like he also saw it. Then Shigaraki raised a hand and snapped his fingers. Kurogiri opened a warp gate behind Shigaraki and the Nomu at the same time. They didn't run because they were scared. They left because they had what they came for. As they vanished into the fog, Shigaraki's eyes locked onto Annie's glow one last time. He mouthed words in English, slow and clear. See you." The gates shut. The street fell quiet except for distant sirens and people crying and shouting and talking at once. Annie floated down to the ground, glow fading as she stopped pulling power. Lights around her steadied. For a moment, nothing flickered. Annie exhaled, shaking slightly, and turned to see phones raised everywhere. Cameras, always cameras. Hawks landed beside her, looking out at the crowd. "Welp," he said, too casual. "You just made the national news." Annie's stomach sank. All Might stepped closer, smile back on, though his eyes were serious. "You fought bravely." Aizawa's voice stayed flat, but his gaze softened a fraction. "You didn't crash the hospital power. Good control." Annie swallowed. "They wanted me." Nezu's voice came through Aizawa's earpiece, calm but urgent. "They also recorded you. The broadcasts are spreading." Annie stared at the screens. A big outdoor display, running on backup power, flickered to life. It showed her glowing form in the dust, firing light into the night. A headline in Japanese scrolled under it. Annie couldn't read it, but she could feel what it meant. Unknown. Dangerous. Valuable. Somewhere far away, in a dark room, a calm voice spoke again. "She shines," All for One said, pleased. "And the world looks when she shines." He leaned back, hands folded. "Now," he continued, "let us see what she does when the world tries to own her." The next morning, Annie woke up to silence that did not feel calm. It felt like the kind of silence that came right before someone told you the rules. She lay on her back in a clean UA guest room. The ceiling was plain. The bed was too neat. The air smelled like soap and fresh paint. She sat up and rubbed her eyes. A small lamp on the desk flickered once. Annie froze, then let out a slow breath. "Not now," she whispered. The lamp steadied. She swung her legs off the bed and stood. Her body ached in the places where she had slammed into pavement and pushed power too hard. She had felt the city's electricity like a tide, and she had forced herself to take only what she could. That part still surprised her. In her world, people never trusted her to be careful. They trusted her to look good. She walked to the window. Outside, UA looked peaceful. Students moved between buildings. A few laughed. It sounded normal. But Annie knew better. Normal was fragile. She turned on the small TV in the room, more out of habit than hope. A bright morning news show filled the screen. And there she was, her glowing body on a dark street, her blast hitting Shigaraki. Her face turned toward the camera for half a second, eyes sharp, jaw set. A red circle highlighted her like she was a target. A Japanese headline ran under her clip, and even though Annie couldn't read it, she understood the tone. The anchors talked fast. The studio screens showed charts and questions. The only English words on the broadcast were the ones that mattered most. Unknown hero? Dangerous quirk? Foreign threat? Annie's stomach tightened. A second clip played. The blackout on her arrival. The lights dying around her. The panic. The cracked street. The anchors' smiles were polite. Their eyes were hungry. Annie turned the TV off. The room felt smaller. A knock came at the door. Annie's shoulders went stiff on instinct. "Yeah?" The door opened, and a boy stepped in carefully like he didn't want to scare a stray cat. Green hair, freckles, big eyes that looked like they were always thinking. He held a tray with breakfast. Annie blinked. He bowed fast, almost dropping the tray. "I'm sorry. I should have asked first." His English was good, but his words came out in a rush. Annie raised her hands. "It's okay. It's fine." He stepped forward and set the tray down on the desk. Rice, soup, tea, some fruit. Then he stood straight and bowed again. "My name is Izuku Midoriya." He paused, then added, softer, I saw you yesterday. I saw you fight. Annie studied him. He wasn't afraid of her the way some adults were. He wasn't trying to sell her anything either. He just looked curious and worried. Annie nodded. Annie. Izuku's eyes flicked to the lamp that had flickered earlier, then back to her. Are you okay? Annie let out a short laugh without humor. Depends who's asking. Izuku flinched a little, then forced himself to keep looking at her. I'm asking. That simple answer hit harder than she expected. Annie's face softened a fraction. I'm fine. Izuku hesitated. They're saying a lot of things on TV. Annie looked away. They always do. Izuku took a breath, like he was choosing his words carefully. This world, it has heroes everywhere, but it also has pressure, rankings, public approval, agencies, people who decide what a hero should be. Annie's jaw tightened. So it's not that different. Izuku blinked. Different from where you're from? Annie almost said too much. She almost said vaught. She almost said lies and contracts and being owned. Instead, she kept it simple. Where I'm from, being a hero can turn into being a product. Izuku's eyes widened. Then his face turned serious. That's wrong. Annie looked at him sharply. You're sure? Izuku nodded hard. A hero is someone who saves people. That's what All Might taught us. At the name, Annie felt it again. That big, warm presence, that smile that made people breathe easier. Annie's voice went quieter. All Might is a symbol. Yes, Izuku said, almost glowing with pride. He's the symbol of peace. Annie stared at the floor for a moment. Symbols were powerful. Symbols also got used. She spoke slowly. Symbols can help, but they can also hide things. They can make people stop asking questions. Izuku's expression faltered, like the idea hurt. All Might isn't like that. Annie looked up at him. I hope you're right. Izuku swallowed. He didn't argue again. He just said, honest and small. If you need help, I want to help. Annie didn't answer right away. She didn't trust easily. But she also didn't want to crush this kid's courage. So she nodded once. Thanks. Izuku let out a breath, like he had been holding it. Okay. There's a meeting today. They want you there. Annie's shoulders tensed. They. Izuku's voice dropped. The commission. Annie stared at him. You're a student. Why do you know that? Izuku looked embarrassed. I overheard teachers talking. I didn't mean to. Annie shook her head. No, it's good you heard. Izuku hesitated again. Are you scared? Annie's mouth tightened. Then the desk lamp popped and went out. Izuku jumped. Annie sighed. Yes. In a polished building far from UA, the Hero Public Safety Commission held meetings that decided the shape of the world. It wasn't a villain lair. It didn't need to be. The room was bright. The table was long. The chairs were expensive. The people wore clean suits and calm faces. A large screen at the front played Annie's fight again. Pause. Zoom in. Frame her glow. Measure the blast. A woman at the head of the table watched without blinking. She was not old, but her eyes looked tired in a way that came from power. Her name was Director Kido. She spoke softly. Everyone listened. Unknown ability, unknown origin, no registration, no family record, no quirk record. A man beside her cleared his throat. UA reports that erasure did not fully cancel her power. Kido's fingers tapped once on the table. That means she is either outside the quirk system or beyond its normal rules. Another officer leaned forward. Public reaction is mixed. Some are calling her a villain. Others are calling her a miracle. Kido's mouth turned into a thin smile. Public reaction can be guided. A younger aide hesitated. UA wants to keep her under their protection. All Might is involved. Keto's eyes narrowed slightly at the name. Yes, and that complicates control. She lifted a small remote and switched the screen to another feed. Annie saving the elevator victims. Annie keeping her hands up on the street. Annie refusing to run. Keto watched her face, not the light. She has a conscience, Keto said. Good. The officers nodded, unsure why that was good. Keto continued. A conscience can be directed. A conscience can be pressured. A conscience can be used to make her cooperate without chains. One officer asked carefully, "And if she refuses?" Keto's voice stayed calm. "Then we do what we always do. We create a problem only we can solve." She looked around the table. "Prepare the meeting with UA," she said. "Bring the papers. Bring the translator. Bring the photo teams." The room shifted slightly, like the building itself understood what was coming. "And one more thing," Keto added. She clicked the remote. The screen showed Annie's arrival black out again. The panic, the cars. Keto's eyes stayed flat. "Run this clip more often. Keep the word blackout attached to her. Aide, even if it's unfair." Keto's gaze snapped to the aide. The aide swallowed and looked down. Keto's voice softened, almost kind. "Fairness is a story. Safety is a job." The meeting room at UA was polite in a way that made Annie's skin crawl. There was tea again. There were folders. There were soft voices. Director Keto sat across from Annie with 2 commissioned staff members beside her. A translator sat slightly back, ready to jump in. Aizawa stood near the wall with his arms crossed. Hawks leaned against another wall, smiling like he belonged in both places and neither. Nezu sat at the center, calm as ever. All Might stood just behind Annie's chair, like a wall made of sunshine. Annie hated that she liked having him there. Keto smiled at Annie. "Miss January, thank you for meeting us." The translator repeated it. Annie answered in English. "I didn't come here to meet you. I came here because you asked." Keto's smile did not change. "And you agreed." Annie's eyes narrowed. "I didn't agree to anything. Not yet." Hawks made a tiny sound like he was trying not to laugh. Aizawa didn't move. Nezu's voice was gentle. "Director Keto, we appreciate your concern. But Annie is under UA protection for now." Keto's eyes flicked to Nezu. "Of course. And that is why we will work together." She slid a folder across the table. It stopped in front of Annie like a trap. "This is a temporary agreement," Keto said. "It gives you legal status, it gives you protection, it gives you work opportunities. It gives us guidelines so we can keep the public safe." The translator spoke quickly. Annie looked at the folder, but didn't touch it. "What are the guidelines?" Keto's tone stayed smooth. "You will remain in approved housing. You will not patrol alone. You will not contact outside parties without notice. You will submit to routine evaluations. You will follow media protocols." Annie's mouth tightened. All Might's voice came in, warm but firm. "Director Keto, she is not a citizen of our world. These demands may be too heavy." Keto turned her smile to him. All Might, always concerned, always kind. Her eyes shifted, sharp under the smile. "And always forgetting what happens when an unknown power runs free." Annie leaned forward. "You mean when your system can't control it?" The room went still. Hawks's smile thinned. Aizawa's eyes narrowed, but he didn't stop her. Nezu's ears twitched. Keto studied Annie like she was a new tool, testing if it was sharp. "I mean," Keto said, "when civilians suffer because heroes act on emotion." Annie's voice stayed steady. I saved civilians before I even knew where I was. Kido nodded slowly. That is why we want you visible. We want the public to see you as a hero. Annie didn't believe her. She heard the real message. We want the public to see you the way we tell them. Annie pushed the folder back without opening it. No, she said. The translator repeated the word, and it sounded even harder in Japanese. Kido's smile held, but the air cooled. Miss January, Kido said gently, you are alone here. You do not understand our laws. If you operate without permission, you may be treated as a villain. Annie's eyes flashed. So you're threatening me? Kido tilted her head. I am warning you. All Might stepped forward slightly. His shadow fell across the table. Director Kido, he said, voice still friendly but heavier now. UA will not treat a rescuer like a criminal. Kido looked up at him, and for a moment her smile looked almost sad. And if she causes another blackout, if a hospital loses power, if children die. Annie's stomach twisted, because that was the one hook that could snag her. Kido saw it. Annie could tell. Kido leaned back. We are not enemies, Miss January. We are the guardrails that keep society from falling off the road. Annie stared at her. Guardrails can also trap you in a lane. Aizawa spoke for the first time, flat and sharp. Enough! She said no. Kido's eyes flicked to Aizawa. Eraserhead, your job is to stop dangers. Aizawa's gaze didn't move. My job is to protect kids, and right now, you're acting like the danger. Hawks let out a low whistle. Oof! Kido's smile finally slipped for half a second. Then it returned. Very well, she said. We will not force signatures today. She pushed the folder back toward her side. But, she added, calm again, the world will move with or without this agreement. She stood. Her staff stood with her. Kido bowed politely to Nezu and All Might. Then she looked at Annie one last time. Be careful with your light, she said softly. In our world, lights attract moths. Annie stared at her. The metaphor was simple, and it landed. When Kido left, the room breathed again. Annie realized her hands were shaking. All Might's voice came low beside her. You did well to stand your ground? Annie didn't look at him. Did I? Aizawa muttered. You made new enemies. Hawks shrugged. Also true. Nezu sipped tea. But you also showed them you are not easy to place in a box. Annie stared at the empty doorway. She heard Kido's words again. The world will move with or without you. Annie whispered, more to herself than anyone else. It always does. That afternoon, UA tried to give Annie space, but space didn't stop the world outside from talking. Students watched her in the hallways like she was a myth that had walked off a screen. Some looked excited, some looked afraid, some looked angry. In a training corridor, the blonde boy from before stepped right into her path. Bakugo! He stood with his hands in his pockets like he owned the air. Annie stopped. He glared at her. You're a walking problem. Annie blinked. Hello to you too. Bakugo's eyes sharpened. You're not even a real hero here. You don't have a license. You show up, break lights, and everyone acts like you're special. Annie felt heat rise in her chest. A wall light beside them flickered. Annie forced herself to breathe. I didn't ask to be special, Bakugo snorted. That's what all fakes say. That word hit a nerve so deep, Annie almost saw stage lights again. She stepped closer, not threatening, just firm. Do you know what a fake hero is? Bakugo didn't flinch. Someone who can't back it up. Annie's eyes narrowed. A fake hero is someone who saves people when cameras are on, then forgets them when cameras are off. Bakugo's face twisted like he didn't like hearing that. Annie continued, voice low and sharp. You're strong. You're brave. But if all you care about is winning, you're going to hurt people." Bakugo's hands twitched. For a second, it looked like he might explode right there. Then a calm voice cut in. "Bakugo," Todoroki said, stepping between them slightly, not shielding Bakugo, just stopping a stupid moment from becoming worse. "Leave." Bakugo glared at Todoroki, then at Annie. "Whatever." He shoved past them, shoulder brushing Annie's arm. Annie stayed still. Todoroki watched Bakugo go, then looked at Annie. His voice was quiet. "He hates feeling like he can't control something." Annie let out a breath. "Same." Todoroki's eyes shifted to her. "The Commission wants to control you." Annie stared at him. "Yeah." Todoroki's face stayed calm, but his words were careful. "When adults try to shape you, they usually say it's for your own good." Annie's chest tightened. She saw something in Todoroki's expression, a familiar pressure, a life lived under someone else's hand. She spoke softly. "I'm sorry." Todoroki blinked, like he wasn't used to that. "It's fine." Annie shook her head. "No, it's not." They stood in silence for a moment. Then Todoroki said, "Honest, if you need help, I won't pretend I know your life. But I understand being treated like a tool." Annie nodded once. "Thanks." A light above them flickered again. Todoroki looked up. "Is that you?" Annie groaned. "Kind of." Todoroki's mouth twitched. "That's inconvenient." Annie let out a small laugh. It felt strange. But it felt real. That night, someone leaked a new story. It spread fast. Clips of Annie arriving in the street played again and again, but edited differently now. Slower. Darker music. Stronger words. They showed the blackout first. They showed people falling. They showed panic. They didn't show Annie pushing the sign away. They didn't show her saving the truck driver. They didn't show her hands up, trying to calm people. The headline in English this time was clear enough for Annie to read on a shared screen in the dorm. "Street blackout caused by foreign power." Under it, smaller words. "Hero community demands accountability." Annie stared at it until her eyes burned. Aizawa walked into the common area and saw the screen. His mouth tightened. That was fast. Hawks leaned over the couch, scrolling on his phone. "Oh, it's trending." "People love a simple villain." Annie's voice came out sharp. "I didn't do it on purpose." Aizawa looked at her. "I know." Annie stared at him. "How?" Aizawa's eyes stayed tired but steady. "Because you could have done worse. You didn't." Annie swallowed hard. Nezu's voice came from a small speaker on the wall. "Annie, please come to my office." Annie's stomach dropped. She stood. The hallway lights flickered as she walked. She clenched her fists and forced herself to loosen them. Don't feed the fear. In Nezu's office, the principal sat behind his desk with a tablet open. He looked up. "Please sit." Annie sat on the edge of the chair, tense. Nezu turned the tablet so she could see. The leak wasn't just a news clip, it was a file trail. "Someone accessed UA's incident logs," Nezu said, "and someone accessed city grid reports. These are not public." Annie's eyes narrowed. "So it came from inside." Nezu nodded. "Possibly inside the hero system, yes." Annie's hands tightened on her knees. "The Commission." Nezu did not confirm it. He didn't need to. He simply said, "We must assume that powerful people will shape your story to force you into their preferred path." Annie's voice shook, but she kept it controlled. "So what do I do?" Nezu's eyes softened a fraction. "You decide what kind of hero you will be in a world that wants to define you." Annie stared at him. "I'm tired of being defined." Nezu nodded. "Then define yourself with actions." But do not be reckless. Reckless heroes become easy to remove. Annie swallowed. I want to find who did this. Nezu watched her carefully. That is understandable. It is also dangerous. Annie leaned forward. I didn't come here to be quiet while they paint me as a threat. Nezu held her gaze. If you seek truth, you will disturb those who profit from lies. Annie's eyes hardened. Good. Nezu's small smile returned. Very well. But you will not do it alone. Annie blinked. You'll help me? Nezu's voice stayed calm. I will not allow a student or a guest under my care to be crushed by politics. Annie felt something in her chest loosen. Just a little. Nezu tapped his tablet. I will allow you to review certain public records, patterns, funding routes, damage repairs, agency contracts, but you will do so under supervision. Annie nodded. Fine. Nezu looked toward the door. I will assign a shadow. The door opened. Aizawa walked in, hands in his pockets, expression flat. Annie sighed. Of course. Aizawa's eyes narrowed. You wanted to investigate. You get me. Hawks's voice came from the hallway. And me. Hawks leaned in with a grin like a kid sneaking into a movie. Aizawa glared. No. Hawks shrugged. Yes. Nezu's smile widened. Actually, yes. Hawks is good at information. Annie stared at Hawks. Are you always going to joke? Hawks lifted his hands. I joke when I'm nervous. Aizawa muttered. He jokes all the time. Annie stood. Okay, let's do it. As she walked out, the hallway lights flickered like they were whispering her name. And somewhere far away, in a dark room full of screens, someone watched the leak spread and smiled. All for One's voice was calm, almost kind. Now she feels alone, he said. Now she will look for allies. He leaned closer to the monitor where Annie's face appeared, tense and furious. And when she looks, he murmured, we will offer her the only thing that can pull her heart. The first step in Annie's truth hunt was boring. It was numbers, repairs after villain attacks, which companies won the contracts, which agencies got new gear right after a crisis, which politicians were in photos shaking hands after the dust settled. Annie sat in a quiet room with Nezu's approved data and a laptop that felt too clean to trust. Aizawa sat near the door like a guard dog that didn't need to bark. Hawk sat on the floor because he refused to sit like a normal person. Annie scrolled and scrolled until her eyes ached. At first it looked random, then she started to notice patterns. A certain support company kept appearing. A certain security contractor kept showing up near sensitive sites right before trouble hit. A certain agency always had good camera angles during rescues. Annie's stomach tightened. This is, she said, searching for a simple word. Hawks supplied it. Convenient. Aizawa's voice was flat. Too convenient. Annie tapped the screen. This contractor was near the substation 2 days before the League attacked it. Hawks leaned in. And here they are again near a warehouse fire last month. And again near a train incident. Aizawa's eyes narrowed. Someone is staging problems or feeding information. Annie's jaw tightened. In my world, that was normal. Aizawa didn't look at her. Not here. Not supposed to be. Annie stared at the list again. Supposed to be doesn't mean true. Hawk scratched his cheek. So what's the next move? Annie pointed to an address tied to the contractor. We go where the money goes. Aizawa's eyes narrowed. We don't break laws. Annie looked at him. We don't need to. We just need to see who shows up. Hawks grinned. Stakeout? Aizawa sighed like the universe was testing him. Fine. Annie stood. Tonight. The overhead light flickered. Aizawa looked up at it, then at Annie. Control it. Annie huffed. I'm trying. Hawks chuckled. Your power has a mood, Annie snapped. So do you. Hawks's grin only got wider. True. That night, they stood on a rooftop near a quiet industrial district. The air smelled like oil and rain. Below them was a small office building with a bland sign. No flashy lights, no hero posters. Just a place people would ignore. Annie crouched near the roof edge, peeking down. Hawks hovered beside her, wings barely moving, as steady as a drone. Aizawa stood back in the shadows, scarf loose but ready. Annie whispered, "That's the place." Aizawa's voice came low. "We watch. We don't storm." Annie nodded. Minutes passed. A van pulled up. 2 men in dark jackets stepped out carrying cases. Not hero gear, not normal tools either. Hawks's eyes sharpened. "Those cases look like tech." Annie's stomach turned. "I know that walk." Aizawa's voice was a soft warning. "Stay calm." Annie forced her breathing slow. Then the streetlights below flickered. Annie squeezed her eyes shut. "Sorry," Hawks whispered. "It's okay. Honestly, it helps. If anyone asks why lights died, we blame the blackout girl." Annie glared at him. Hawks lifted a hand. "Too soon?" Aizawa muttered. "Quiet." The men entered the building. A few minutes later, another car arrived. A nicer one. A woman stepped out in a clean suit. She moved like she owned the sidewalk. Annie's spine went stiff. Even from this distance, Annie recognized the posture. Not Director Kido, but someone like her. Someone trained to smile while pushing knives. Hawks whispered, "Commission." Aizawa's eyes narrowed. So the contractor meets the commission at night. Great. Annie's chest tightened. She didn't want to be right, but she was. Annie watched the woman enter the building. Hawks murmured, "We got what we needed. Proof of contact." Annie kept staring. "Not enough." Aizawa's voice turned sharp. "Annie!" Annie swallowed. "I'm not going in. I'm not dumb." Aizawa's eyes stayed on her. "Good." They stayed another 10 minutes, then retreated before anyone noticed. On the way back, Annie's mind wouldn't stop. The hero system. The commission. The contractors. It wasn't Vort, but it rhymed. And that was the part that scared her. The next day, Annie received a message. Not on her phone, not on her laptop, on a plain piece of paper, tucked under the door of her guest room like someone in a movie was trying too hard. Annie stared at it for a full 10 seconds before picking it up. The paper had only one line written in clean English. "I can send you home." No name, no number, just those words. Annie's heart slammed against her ribs. She read it again. And again. The lamp on her desk flickered like it wanted to explode. Annie grabbed the paper and marched into the hall. Aizawa was there almost immediately, like he had been waiting nearby. "What happened?" Annie held the paper up. "This happened." Aizawa took it, eyes scanning fast. His face didn't change. But his body got 10% more dangerous. Hawks appeared behind him like he had been summoned by drama. "Ooh, secret note." Annie glared. "Not funny." Hawks's smile faded. "Okay, yeah. Not funny." Aizawa looked at Annie. "Do you want to go home?" Annie's throat tightened. She didn't answer right away because answering felt like admitting how much she wanted it. Finally, she said, very quietly, "Yes." Aizawa nodded once. "Then this is bait." Annie's eyes sharpened. "I know." Hawks leaned closer. "Only one group here talks like that, and it's not the commission." Annie's skin prickled. "The villains." Aizawa's voice stayed flat. "All for one." Annie stared at the paper like it might burn her. Hawks said softer now, "He's trying to hook you with your biggest want." Annie's jaw clenched. "I'm not stupid." Aizawa's eyes narrowed. You don't have to be stupid to be tempted. Annie looked up at him. For a second, she saw the truth in his face. He didn't think she was weak. He thought she was human. Annie took the paper back. She folded it once, then again, and shoved it into her pocket like she was burying it. Her voice came out steady, but tight. I'm not making deals. Aizawa nodded. Good. Hawks lifted a finger. But we should assume he'll try again. Annie stared down the hall toward the bright windows. She hated that the note had shaken her. She hated that it had worked at all. And she hated that her lights were still flickering. That evening, the smear campaign got worse. A new video spread online with expert analysis. They circled her arrival again and again and called it reckless foreign power. Then they ran a clip of her blasting Shigaraki and called it unlicensed violence. They did not mention Shigaraki was a mass murderer. They did not mention civilians she saved. They did not mention that heroes used force all the time when needed. Annie watched for 30 seconds and turned it off. She sat on the floor in her room with her back against the wall, knees pulled up. The darkness felt safer than the bright screens. A soft knock came. Izuku's voice. Annie, can I come in? Annie hesitated, then said, Yeah. Izuku stepped in slowly, holding his phone down like he didn't want to shove bad news in her face. He looked worried. I saw the videos. Annie stared at the floor. Let me guess. People hate me. Izuku's voice got firm, more than she expected. Some people, but not everyone. Annie looked up. Does it matter? Izuku swallowed. It shouldn't, but it can. He sat on the floor across from her, giving her space. He spoke carefully. When you fight, you're thinking about saving people. I can tell. But the public doesn't see your thoughts. They only see clips. Annie's mouth tightened. So what do I do? Smile more? Izuku shook his head fast. No. I mean, maybe for some heroes that helps, but... He looked down at his hands. All Might smiled because he wanted people to feel safe, not because he wanted to be owned. Annie's eyes narrowed. And does he ever feel owned? Izuku flinched like the question hurt. I don't know. Annie's voice softened a little. I'm not trying to attack him. Izuku nodded, still tense. I know. Annie stared at him. Deku. Izuku blinked. Huh? Annie pointed slightly. They called you that yesterday. Izuku's face turned pink. Oh, yes, that's my hero name. Annie nodded. Okay, Deku, listen. Izuku leaned in. Annie spoke slowly, like she was building the words out of stone. In my world, the system looked like heroes. But it was businesses. And when you're inside it, you start thinking maybe the only way to help is to play along. Izuku watched her, eyes wide. Annie continued. I don't want you to learn that lesson the hard way. Izuku's voice came out small. What lesson? Annie's eyes hardened. That doing the right thing can make powerful people hate you. Izuku swallowed. Then his face firmed, like he was choosing a path. I still want to do the right thing, he said. Annie stared at him for a long beat. Then she nodded once. Good. The lamp in the corner flickered and steadied. Annie almost smiled. Then her phone buzzed. Aizawa's message. Meeting. Now. Annie stood. Izuku stood too. Is it trouble? Annie didn't answer right away. She touched the folded note in her pocket without meaning to. Then she said, It's always trouble. Nezu's office felt calmer than the rest of the world. That was part of what made it scary. Nezu sat behind his desk. Aizawa stood beside the window. Hawks perched on the arm of a chair like he was allergic to normal posture. All Might was not there. That worried Annie more than she wanted to admit. Nezu tapped a screen. The smear videos used internal details again. Details that should not be public. Annie's jaw tightened. So it's still inside. Aizawa nodded. Yes. Hawks spoke, less playful now. And it's spreading fast. It's shaping a story. Annie equals blackout. Annie equals danger. Then the commission shows up as the solution. Annie's voice went cold. So they can force me to sign. Nezu's eyes stayed gentle. Possibly. Annie pulled the folded note from her pocket and set it on Nezu's desk. Nezu looked at it. Aizawa's eyes narrowed. Hawks went still. Nezu read the line again. I can send you home. Annie's voice tightened. I got it under my door. Aizawa's scarf shifted slightly, like his body wanted to act. That means someone got inside UA, or someone used a student or staff route? Hawks muttered. That's bad. Annie's hands clenched. So now villains and the commission both want me. Nezu nodded. Yes. Annie leaned forward. Then we stop playing defense. We go after the source. Aizawa's voice stayed flat. And how do you plan to do that without becoming the villain they're trying to paint you as? Annie held his gaze. By finding truth and showing it. Hawks tilted his head. Truth isn't always enough. Annie snapped. Then what is? Hawks didn't joke. He just said, honest. Timing. Allies. Proof so strong even liars choke on it. Annie stared at him. Nezu spoke softly. Acting alone will isolate you. That is what both sides want. Annie's chest rose and fell. So I need a team. Aizawa nodded once. Yes. Annie looked at Aizawa, then Hawks, then Nezu. She didn't trust easily, but she trusted patterns, and the pattern right now was clear. She needed help, or she would get swallowed. Fine, she said, but I'm not letting them turn me into a poster. Nezu's smile returned. Agreed. Aizawa's voice was dry. Try not to black out the whole campus while you're angry. Annie groaned. I'm trying. Hawks grinned just a little. Progress. Nezu tapped his screen again. We begin with records. We follow funding. Then we observe meetings. Annie's eyes sharpened. And if we find something illegal, Aizawa answered first. We report it through proper channels. Annie's voice turned sharp. The proper channels are part of the problem. Aizawa stared at her. Then he said, Lo, which is why we also keep copies. Annie blinked. Hawks grinned wider. Look at us. We're already doing crime-adjacent teamwork. Aizawa shot him a glare. Nezu's smile widened. No crimes, only preparation. Annie didn't laugh, but something in her chest eased anyway. Because for the first time since she arrived here, she didn't feel like she was standing alone in the spotlight. She felt like she had someone on each side, keeping the edges of the world from closing in. Outside the office, the hall lights flickered. Annie closed her eyes and breathed. Then they steadied again. A week later, Annie's small steps turned into a side mission that swallowed her whole. It started with one name, a contractor company, Shirokane Security Solutions. They were always around disasters, always early, always helpful. They were also connected to a support tech supplier that made portable power tools. Portable power tools that looked a lot like portable EMP gear. Gear that could cut Annie off. Annie sat with Hawks and Aizawa in a quiet UA planning room. Aizawa pointed at a map. This is their storage warehouse. Hawks tapped another spot. This is a back alley market where illegal support gear gets traded. Annie's eyes narrowed. Black market. Hawks nodded. Yeah, it's not huge, but it's active. Aizawa's voice was flat. We do not go charging in. Annie looked at him. We don't have to. We just watch. We follow. Hawks smiled. Now you're speaking my language. Annie stood and rolled her shoulders. Then we go tonight. Aizawa sighed like he had lost a bet with the universe. Fine. Hawks lifted a hand. One rule. Annie frowned. You're giving rules now? Hawks grinned. Yes. Rule. You do not try to talk to shady people in English and hope it works. Annie glared. I can handle myself, Hawks shrugged. I know, but I can also handle words. So I'll do the talking. Aizawa added, and I'll do the stopping. Annie muttered, and I'll do the glowing. Aizawa looked at her. Preferably not too much. Annie rolled her eyes. Preferably. The illegal market wasn't a dramatic place. That was the worst part. It wasn't neon lights and loud music like in movies. It was a quiet row of old shops with rolling metal doors, half open for people who knew where to look. It smelled like oil, sweat, and old smoke. Annie wore plain clothes. A hoodie, dark pants, no bright colors. Her hair was tucked back. She still felt like a spotlight walking into a cave. Aizawa moved beside her, hands in pockets, face tired, looking like a man who didn't care about anything. It was a good disguise, because it was basically true. Hawks walked a few steps ahead, looking casual, like a bored young adult out for a late stroll. Annie whispered, How do you know this place? Hawks didn't look back. I'm a pro hero. I see stuff. Annie muttered, That's not an answer. Hawks smiled a little. It is, if you don't ask more. Aizawa's voice came low. Eyes up, don't stare. Annie nodded, scanning without obvious scanning. She saw men trading cases. She saw a woman slipping cash into a sleeve. She saw a teenager holding a small device that hummed softly. Annie's stomach tightened. She felt the hum in her bones. Power-related tech, her kind of problem. Hawks stopped at a stall that looked like it sold old radios. He spoke in Japanese to the seller, casual and smooth. The seller's eyes flicked over Hawks, then over Annie and Aizawa. He answered, short and wary. Hawks laughed like it was a friendly joke, then leaned in and said something lower. The seller's face shifted. Not fear. Not anger. Recognition. Annie's skin prickled. Hawks walked back to Annie and Aizawa, still smiling. He says Shirokane is buying a lot of quiet tools, Hawks murmured in English. Stuff that shuts down cameras, phones, power lines. Annie's eyes narrowed. Like cutting my power. Hawks nodded. And he says they have a meeting tonight at the warehouse. Aizawa's voice went cold. Then we watch the warehouse? Annie glanced around. A streetlight above them flickered. Annie forced her breathing slow again. Aizawa noticed. He murmured, Don't. Annie whispered back, I'm not doing it on purpose. Hawks said, Maybe your nervous system is wired to the grid, like literally. Annie gave him a look. That's not helping. Hawks lifted his hands. Okay. They moved away from the market and into a darker side street. The moment they turned a corner, Annie felt it. A wrong quiet. Footsteps stopped too fast behind them. Aizawa's scarf shifted slightly, ready. Hawk's feathers lifted, subtle. Annie's body tensed. Then a sharp click sounded. The streetlight behind them went out. Then the one ahead. Then the one above. Darkness swallowed the alley. Annie's heart jumped. Aizawa's voice was low and hard. That wasn't you. Annie swallowed. No. Hawks's smile vanished. That was an EMP. Annie's skin went cold. A device hummed in the dark. A low, ugly hum. Her glow tried to rise. It didn't. Not like it should. It felt like reaching for a door that had been locked from the other side. Annie's breathing sped up. They're cutting the power. Aizawa's voice stayed calm. Stay behind me. Annie's pride flared. I can fight. Aizawa snapped. You can fight better if you're alive. Hawks whispered. Company. Left and right. Shapes moved in the dark. 5, 6, men in dark gear, masks, not villains with flashy costumes. These looked like professionals. One of them spoke in English. "Annie January, you'll come quietly." Annie's blood went hot. No, the lamp in her mind wanted to flare, but the EMP field held. Annie felt weaker, not helpless, but not at her best, and she hated that. Aizawa stepped forward, eyes sharp even in low light. "Who are you?" The man didn't answer. Instead, two of them rushed in from opposite sides, trying to grab Annie's arms like they had practiced it. Aizawa moved like a snap. His scarf shot out, wrapping one attacker's wrist and yanking him off balance. Hawks's feather sliced through the air and pinned another attacker's sleeve to a wall, stopping a clean punch from landing. Annie ducked under a grab and drove her elbow into a man's ribs. He grunted, but didn't fall. They were armored. They were prepared. Annie's mind here raced. They planned for me. They planned for UA heroes too. A third attacker raised a larger device, like a bulky flashlight with no light. The hum deepened. Annie's skin prickled. Her teeth buzzed. The field got stronger. Her glow dimmed even more. Hawks cursed under his breath. "They brought the big one." Aizawa's voice was flat. "Take it." Hawk's feathers shot toward the device, but the attacker swung it, and the feathers that touched it went limp for a second, like their tiny motors had been stunned. Hawks's eyes widened. "It's affecting my feather control too." Aizawa's scarf snapped again, trying to disarm the attacker. But another man stepped in and swung a metal baton at the scarf, knocking it aside. These weren't random thugs. They were trained to fight pro heroes. Annie felt anger surge. Her chest burned. The streetlight at the alley entrance flickered weakly like it wanted to return. Annie locked onto that tiny spark. Not the whole grid, just that. She reached for it with everything she had. The EMP field fought her, but electricity was her language. She pulled. The flicker grew. The streetlight snapped on for half a second, and Annie stole that half second of power like a thief. Her hands flashed bright, small but sharp. The nearest attacker flinched, eyes snapping shut. Annie used the moment. She slammed her palm into his chest and released a tight, concussive burst. Even weak, it hit like a heavy shove. He flew back into a trash bin, metal clanging. Aizawa's eyes flicked to Annie. "Good. Keep it small." Annie nodded, breathing hard. Hawks grinned in the dark. "Nice hack." Annie snapped, "Not now." Hawks laughed once anyway. Then an attacker yelled, "Move! Take her!" They rushed together, a group push. Annie saw the goal. They weren't trying to knock her out. They were trying to drag her into a van. She backed toward the alley wall, keeping her front clear, forcing them to come from one direction. Aizawa stepped in like a wall, scarf whipping around ankles and wrists. Hawks used feathers as shields, not blades, redirecting bodies and blocking batons. Annie grabbed another tiny flicker of street power, flashed, then shoved. Flash. Shove. Flash. Shove. It wasn't pretty. It was survival. Then one attacker slipped behind Hawks and swung the big EMP device toward Annie's head. Annie's eyes widened. Aizawa moved instantly. He threw his scarf like a lasso and yanked the device out of the attacker's hands. It hit the ground and cracked. The hum stopped. The alley lights flickered on all at once. Annie gasped as the grid rushed back into her, like air into lungs. Her glow flared bright. The attackers froze for a split second, realizing their advantage was gone. And that split second was enough. Annie lifted both hands and released one blinding flash, angled upward so it lit the alley without burning eyes. Then she fired a concussive wave down the ground, like a rolling push. The attackers slammed back, knocked off their feet in a rough line, not killed, not broken, but stopped. Hawks landed lightly, feathers surrounding the attackers like a cage. Aizawa stepped forward, eyes cold. Stay down. The leader groaned and tried to crawl. Annie walked up, glow still bright, and crouched beside him. Her voice was low. "Who sent you?" He spat, then laughed, breathless. "Doesn't matter. You can't fight the system." That line made Annie's stomach twist, because she knew it. She had lived it. She grabbed his collar and pulled him closer. "Answer me." His eyes flicked to her light. For a moment, Annie saw something there. Not fear, not hate. A kind of sad acceptance. He whispered in English. "We were told you'd break the grid. We were told you'd be a danger. We were told we were saving people." Annie stared at him. Then her eyes narrowed harder. "Who told you?" she demanded. He coughed, then said, "Quiet. Shirokine. Commission friends." Aizawa's gaze sharpened. Hawks's smile vanished. Annie felt cold rage spread through her chest like ice water. The nearest streetlight flickered. Annie forced herself to breathe again before it died. Aizawa stood beside her. "We take them in." Hawks nodded. "And we take their gear." Annie stood slowly, eyes still on the attacker. "And we go to the warehouse." Aizawa's voice was hard. "Not alone." Annie looked at him. "Never alone." Hawks muttered, "I hate being right about stuff." Annie didn't smile, because now she understood. This wasn't only about villains. This was about people in suits deciding who deserved freedom. And Annie was done being decided. The warehouse looked boring from the outside. Plain walls, metal doors, a few cameras. But now Annie could see the hidden signs. Too many cameras for a normal storage place. Too many locks. Too many security vans parked nearby. Hawks hovered above the roofline, scanning. Aizawa and Annie stayed in a shadowed alley across the street, watching through a small gap. Annie's glow was off. She had learned to keep it low unless needed. Her body felt like a coiled spring. Aizawa whispered, "We observe first." Annie nodded. A side door opened. A man in a clean suit walked out, talking on a phone. He looked annoyed, not scared. 2 Shirokane security men followed him. The suit man pointed at a truck. "Move it. Now. The commission will not wait." Annie's eyes narrowed. "Commission again?" Aizawa's voice went cold. "We need proof." Hawks's voice crackled in the earpiece. "I see movement inside. Lots of crates. Some marked as support equipment. Some not marked at all." Annie whispered, "What do you mean?" Hawks paused. "I mean there are cages." Annie's blood ran cold. "Cages for what?" Hawks's voice went quieter. "I can't tell yet." Aizawa's scarf shifted slightly. "We don't storm without knowing." Annie clenched her fists, then forced them to relax. "Then I'm going in to look." Aizawa's head snapped toward her. "No!" Annie met his gaze. "I'm not asking." Aizawa's voice turned sharp. "And I'm not letting you run into a trap." Annie's jaw tightened. People could be in cages. Aizawa's expression flickered. That hit him too. He exhaled, then spoke into his mic. "Hawks, can you get eyes inside without being seen?" Hawks answered fast. "Already working on it." A feather slipped through a roof vent like a silent blade. Hawks' voice came back tense. "Okay. Yeah." Annie's stomach dropped. "Yeah, what?" Hawks swallowed. "They're holding kids." Annie went still. Aizawa went still too. For a second, even the city noise felt far away. Hawks continued. Voice tight. "Not UA kids. Street kids. Runaways. They've got them in cages. They're testing gear on them. Power gear. Quirk suppressors. Stuff like that." Annie's vision narrowed. All she could see was stage lights and a child version of herself in a costume she didn't pick. She whispered, "No." Aizawa's voice turned deadly calm. "We go." Annie nodded. "Now." Hawks added quickly. Wait, there's more. I see a hidden room, big screen, files, and a woman in a suit. Annie's eyes hardened. Director Keto. Hawks paused. Not Keto, but definitely Commission. Aizawa's jaw clenched. Then this isn't a rumor. It's real. Annie's glow started rising without permission. Streetlights across the road flickered. Aizawa grabbed her shoulder. Control it. Annie swallowed hard, forcing the light down. Forcing herself to breathe like she wasn't about to explode. Her voice came out low and shaking. We save them first. Aizawa nodded once. Always. Hawks's voice sharpened. I'll cut cameras. Quietly. You two go through the back loading door. I'll guide you. Annie moved. They crossed the street low and fast. Hawks dropped feathers onto camera lenses like dark blinds. One by one, red recording lights died. Annie's heart hammered. Aizawa slipped to the back door and pressed a small tool to the lock. He didn't look like a thief. He looked like a teacher breaking into a place he should never have to break into. The lock clicked. They slid inside. The air smelled like metal and fear. Dim lights buzzed overhead. Annie's eyes adjusted. Crates lined the space. Some were marked support equipment. Some had blank labels. One had a warning sticker about electrical hazards. Annie's skin prickled. Then she heard it. A small cough. A quiet whimper. Annie followed the sound. Around a corner, she saw them. Cages. Children huddled inside. Dirty faces. Thin arms. Some looked drugged. Some looked wide awake and terrified. Annie froze. Her stomach turned. Aizawa's breath hitched once, the only sign of anger he allowed. Annie stepped forward, glow rising softly. Not for power now, but because emotion had finally forced it out. The nearest child flinched at the light. Annie forced her voice gentle. Hey, it's okay. We're getting you out. A little girl stared at her, then whispered something in Japanese. Annie didn't understand, but she understood the fear. Aizawa crouched, keeping his body low, voice calm. He spoke in Japanese to the kids, steady and simple. Their eyes stayed wide, but some of them leaned forward, like they wanted to believe him. Annie looked at the locks. Her hands glowed brighter. Aizawa whispered, No blasting. Too loud. Annie nodded. She reached into the grid, careful, taking only a thin stream from the warehouse lines. Then she aimed a tiny, precise burst at the lock of the first cage. It popped with a sharp click. The door swung open. The kids didn't move at first. Annie held her hands up, palms open. Come on, please. Aizawa gestured, patient. Finally, one boy crawled out. Then another. Then the little girl. Annie's chest tightened so hard it hurt. Hawk's voice came in, tense. You've got about 2 minutes before someone checks the cameras. Aizawa whispered. Move! They guided the kids down a back corridor toward an exit Hawks had marked. Annie stayed close. Glow, low, lighting the path. One kid clutched her sleeve like she was real and not a dream. Annie swallowed hard and kept walking. Then footsteps echoed ahead. Adult footsteps. Voices. Aizawa's eyes sharpened. He signaled stop. They pressed into a side storage space with the kids tucked behind crates. Annie held her breath. 2 men walked past, talking in Japanese. Annie couldn't understand, but she heard one English word. Asset. Her stomach twisted again. The men passed. The hallway quieted. Aizawa motioned again. Go. They moved. At the exit door, Hawks was there, half crouched, feathers spread like a shield. He ushered the kids out first, guiding them toward a safe alley where emergency services waited quietly. Annie blinked. You called them? Hawks whispered. I'm not just wings. Annie almost smiled. Then a loud alarm blared inside the warehouse. A camera must have come back online. or someone simply noticed cages opening. Aizawa's face went hard. They know. Annie's glow flared brighter. Then we end this. Aizawa grabbed her arm. We don't chase into the whole building with civilians still moving. Annie yanked her arm free, not in anger at him, but because she could feel time slipping. I'm not leaving without proof, she said. Hawks's eyes narrowed. She's right. If we leave with only kids, they'll call it a hero raid and bury everything. Aizawa's jaw clenched. He hated it, but he knew it. He pointed. 30 seconds. In and out. We grab files and go. Annie nodded fast. Deal. They ran back inside. Sirens inside the warehouse screamed louder. Doors slammed. People shouted. They moved toward the hidden room Hawks had mentioned. Annie's light cut through the halls like a moving flashlight. Aizawa stayed ahead, scarf ready to catch anyone who rushed. Hawks's feathers flew ahead like scouts, checking corners. They reached the room. Inside was a big screen with security feeds, files on a desk, a laptop open, a stack of contracts stamped with official seals. And there, turning toward them with a sharp gasp, stood a commission officer in a suit. Not Director Kido, but close enough. Her eyes widened at Annie's glow. Then her face hardened. You shouldn't be here, she snapped in Japanese. Aizawa stepped in. Neither should you. The woman's hand moved toward a panic button. Annie flashed. Small, sharp, and the woman flinched, hand missing the button. Aizawa's scarf snapped, wrapping the woman's wrist, pinning her arm to her side. Hawks swept in and snatched the laptop, feathers already copying files onto a device he carried. The woman struggled. This is authorized. Aizawa's voice was cold. You had children in cages. The woman's face twisted. They were runaways. We were keeping them safe. Annie's voice shook with fury. Safe in a cage? The woman's eyes snapped to Annie. You don't understand our world. Annie stepped closer, glow bright. I understand systems that lie. The lights in the room flickered wildly. Annie forced herself to steady. Hawks hissed. Copying. Copying. Almost. A door slammed open behind them. Shirokane security poured in, armed with batons, stun gear, and more EMP devices. Aizawa's eyes narrowed. Of course. One guard raised an EMP unit. Annie reacted instantly. She blasted the device out of his hands with a tight concussive hit. It flew into the wall and cracked. But another guard raised a second, then a third. They had planned for her. They had learned. Aizawa's scarf whipped out, catching one wrist, snapping the device away. Hawk's feathers pinned another arm to the wall. Annie's glow surged as she drew power from the building lines. But she could feel the danger. If she pulled too hard, she could fry the system. If she blasted too wide, she could hurt people. Her anger screamed at her to burn it all down. Her hero side forced her to stay controlled. She made a choice. She didn't blast them into walls. She blasted the ceiling lights. One sharp burst. The lights exploded into darkness. The room went black. The guards shouted in confusion. Annie, however, could still see. Her glow lit her own space. Hawk's feathers moved by feel. Aizawa fought in the dark like he was born in it. Annie whispered, "Move left." Aizawa shifted left instantly. Annie flashed right, blinding two guards long enough for Hawk's feathers to knock them off balance. Aizawa's scarf wrapped ankles and dropped bodies. It wasn't pretty, but it was fast. Hawks shouted, "Files got! We go!" Annie grabbed the contracts off the desk and stuffed them into a bag. The commission officer struggled, face furious. "You will regret this." Annie leaned close, voice low. "Good." Aizawa yanked his scarf free and they ran. They sprinted down the hallway as alarms screamed. Behind them, someone shouted orders. In front of them, Hawks guided them toward the exit where the kids had already gone. They burst outside into the alley. Police and emergency workers moved in, fast and professional. Hawks handed over the last frightened children. Annie saw the little girl look back at her. Annie gave her a small nod. The girl nodded back. Then Annie turned as the warehouse doors slammed open. Shirokane men spilled out, but they stopped when they saw police lines and heroes arriving. They backed up like rats seeing daylight. A black car pulled up at the end of the street. A woman stepped out. Director Kido. Annie's stomach dropped. Kido's eyes moved over the scene. The kids, the police, the warehouse. Then Kido looked directly at Annie. Her smile appeared, calm as ever, even now. "Miss January," Kido called in English. "This is quite a mess." Annie's glow pulsed. The streetlights flickered. Aizawa stepped in beside her, voice low. "Don't." Annie forced it down. Her voice came out steady. Kids were in cages. Kido's smile didn't change. "So you claim." Hawks held up a small drive between two fingers. "And we've got files." Kido's eyes flicked to the drive. For the first time, her calm face showed something else. Not panic, calculation. Her smile got colder. "Then we will investigate." Annie stared at her. "You were here." Kido's tone stayed soft. "I go where I must." Annie's jaw tightened. "You're part of it." Kido tilted her head. "I am part of safety." Annie stepped forward, glow rising again. "No. You're part of control." Kido's eyes hardened. "Be careful, Miss January. The public already doubts you. If you push too hard, you will look like the villain." Annie's chest burned. That was the real weapon. Not a gun. Not a quirk. A story. Aizawa's voice came low. "We have proof." "We're not playing your game." Kido looked at Aizawa like she was disappointed in him. Eraserhead. "Do you believe you can win against the structure that holds society up?" Aizawa didn't blink. "I don't care about winning. I care about kids." Kido's eyes flicked to the kids being loaded into ambulances. For a second, something like annoyance crossed her face. Then her smile returned. "We will speak soon," she said softly. She got into her car and drove away. Annie watched the car disappear. Her hands were shaking again. Hawks spoke quietly. "That was big." Annie swallowed. "Was it enough?" Aizawa looked at the drive in Hawks's hand. "It's something, but she'll try to bury it." Annie stared at the warehouse. Smoke rose now, not from fire, but from damaged lights and broken gear. She felt a cold truth settle in her bones. The villains wanted her power. The commission wanted her image. And now, after tonight, both sides had a reason to move faster. Annie's glow faded down to a soft shimmer. She whispered, "They're going to come for me harder." Aizawa's voice was flat, but firm. "Then we plan harder." Hawks glanced up at the streetlights, which flickered once, then steadied. "Also, maybe try not to emotionally hack the city grid." Annie shot him a look that almost turned into a laugh. Almost. But then her phone buzzed again. A new message. No number, no name, just one line. "You took my toys. I will take yours." Annie's stomach dropped. Aizawa leaned in and read it over her shoulder. His face stayed tired, but his eyes went sharper than knives. Hawks's smile vanished completely. Annie looked out at the city, bright and dim, calm and fragile. And she understood what she had become. Not a guest, not a rumor, not a new hero on the roster, a central piece in a war she did not choose. She breathed in, she breathed out. Then she said, low and clear, "Let them come." 2 weeks passed. In that time, Annie learned which doors at UA squeaked. She learned which hallways had cameras that turned a little slower. She learned that Japanese vending machines were everywhere, like the country loved tiny flashing boxes. She also learned something else. This world did not stop watching. Every day, someone posted her face online. Every day, someone argued about what she was. Hero, villain, threat, miracle. Annie tried not to read it. Most days she failed. She built a routine anyway, because routine was the only thing that kept her mind from spinning. She woke up early before most students. She did quiet stretches. Then she met Aizawa in a training room with thick walls and a floor that could take a beating. Aizawa did not do friendly pep talks. He simply handed her a timer and pointed. "Control drills," he said. Annie stood in front of a row of battery packs and a small generator unit that had been modified by UA's support staff. The engineers had made it safe. It had limits. It had shutoffs. It had a big red button labeled in English and Japanese. "Do not drain this by accident." Annie stared at the label once, then muttered, "Thanks." Aizawa sat on a bench and watched her like a tired hawk. Annie reached out, pulled a thin stream of energy, and let it fill her hands. She didn't let her skin blaze. She didn't let the light jump. She held it. Then she released it in small bursts at a target board. Pop. 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 Each flash was aimed away from any cameras. Each push was measured. Aizawa clicked the timer. Again. Annie did it again. On the fifth burst, a ceiling light flickered. Annie clenched her jaw. "I'm not even mad." Aizawa didn't blink. "Your body doesn't care." "I hate that," Annie said. Aizawa's voice was flat. "Good. Hate makes you pay attention." Later, she did rescue drills with the students, only with teachers present, only in controlled spaces. It wasn't about fighting. It was about saving. She helped with simulated building fires, guiding people through smoke with soft light that didn't blind. She helped with earthquake drills, using short pushes to move debris without crushing anyone. And every time she got stressed, something near her died. A desk lamp, a hallway light, a student's phone battery. At first, it scared people. Then it turned into a joke. A few students started calling it the Annie warning. If the lights flickered, it meant Annie was annoyed. If the lights died, it meant Annie was angry. Annie pretended she hated the joke. She did hate it. But sometimes, when she saw the students laugh instead of panic, she felt a tiny bit better. Because fear made people cruel. Laughter made them human. Even Bakugo, somehow, stopped yelling about it all the time. He still glared at her like she was a problem that refused to get solved. But once, after a drill, where Annie stopped a falling beam with a careful push, he muttered, "Not bad," and then walked away like the words hurt him. Annie didn't chase him. She took the win. The commission did not take a break. Director Kido requested another meeting. This time, she didn't send suits to UA. She came herself. She arrived with the same calm smile, the same perfect posture, and the same way of speaking like every sentence was a gentle hand on your shoulder. "Miss January," she said, "you have been busy." Annie sat across from her in Nezu's office. Hawks was in the corner, pretending to scroll on his phone. Aizawa stood near the door. Nezu sipped tea like the world wasn't burning. Annie kept her hands on her knees so she wouldn't reach for power on reflex. Kido slid a new folder across the desk. "This is different," Kido said. "No media demands, no staged interviews, no forced patrol schedule." Annie eyed the folder. "What's the catch?" Kido's smile stayed. "A license." Annie didn't touch it. "You already tried that." "Yes," Kido said softly. "And you refused. But the situation has changed." Annie's eyes narrowed. "Because we found your cages?" Kido's eyes cooled for a moment. "We are investigating those claims." Hawk snorted, Quiet but sharp, Kido ignored him. Public trust is unstable. Villains are adapting. And you are a lightning rod. Annie's jaw tightened. So you want to chain the lightning? Kido leaned forward slightly. I want to protect society. Annie's voice went low. You want to control the story. Kido didn't deny it. She didn't need to. She simply said, stories keep people calm. Calm keeps people alive. Nezu's voice was gentle. Director Kido, your view is practical, but it is also dangerous. Kido's smile turned to Nezu. And your view is ideal. That is why I allow UA to exist. Annie felt heat rise in her chest. A desk lamp beside Nezu flickered once. Annie took a slow breath and forced the heat down. Kido noticed anyway. She always noticed. You see, Kido said softly, even now, your emotions affect the environment. The public will not forgive another blackout. Annie stared at her. Then maybe you should stop pushing my emotions. Kido's smile didn't break. I am offering you a path that protects you, a special guest license under UA supervision. You remain at UA, you train, you patrol only with approved teams. You are not a criminal. Annie's eyes narrowed. And in return? Kido's voice stayed smooth. In return, you stop investigating internal systems without authorization. Aizawa's eyes sharpened. Hawks's feathers lifted slightly, like they could feel his annoyance. Annie felt her chest tighten. There it was, the real deal. Be safe. Be legal. Be quiet. Annie looked at the folder again. Then she pushed it back, slowly and clearly. No, she said. Kido's smile finally thinned. Miss January. Annie met her gaze. I will follow safety rules. I will work with UA. I will not patrol alone. I will not put civilians at risk. She leaned forward, voice steady. But I will not sign away my right to ask questions. Kido's eyes hardened, just a little. You are alone in this world. Annie's mouth tightened. Not anymore. Kido's gaze flicked to Aizawa, Hawks, and Nezu. It wasn't anger in her eyes. It was calculation. Very well, Kido said softly. Then you will remain a complicated guest. She stood. Before she left, she looked at Annie one more time. Be careful, she said. You are making powerful enemies. Annie's voice was quiet. I already had powerful enemies? Kido paused, as if she almost wanted to ask what that meant. Then she walked out. When the door shut, Annie finally let out the breath she had been holding. Hawks spoke first. She's not going to stop, Aizawa answered. Neither are we. Nezu sipped tea. And that is why this will escalate. Annie's stomach sank. She didn't want escalation. But she knew Nezu was right, because someone else wasn't stopping either. The person who had written the note. The person who had promised to take her toys. That night, Annie sat on the dorm couch staring at a blank TV screen. She wasn't watching anything. She was waiting. She hated waiting. Aizawa stood near the window, arms crossed. Hawks leaned on the wall, eyes half-lidded like he was bored. But Annie could tell. He wasn't bored. He was listening. Then the lights in the dorm flickered. Once. Twice. Annie's head snapped up. That's not me. Aizawa's voice turned sharp. I know. The lights went out. The TV screen died. The hallway emergency lights clicked on. Annie stood so fast the couch shifted. This is the blackout story again. Hawks's voice was low. This is someone proving they can touch you. A phone on the table buzzed. Not Annie's. Not Aizawa's. A phone that didn't belong to anyone. It hadn't been there a minute ago. It sat on the table like it had always belonged there. Annie's stomach turned. Hawks stepped closer, careful. That's a message delivery. The phone lit up. One incoming call. No number. Aizawa's scarf tightened slightly, ready to move. Annie stared at the phone. Her heart hammered. She reached out and answered. "Hello," she said. A calm voice filled the room. Not loud, not rushed. A voice that sounded like it had all the time in the world. "Annie January," it said in smooth English. "Thank you for answering." Annie's skin went cold. She didn't know the voice from this world, but she knew the type. Someone who didn't ask. Someone who claimed. "You," Annie said, voice tight. "You sent the note." The voice chuckled softly. "I sent an invitation." Hawk's eyes narrowed. Aizawa didn't move. The voice continued. "You want to go home?" Annie's throat tightened. She forced the words out. "How would you even—" "I know many things," the voice said. "I know you do not belong here. I know your power does not follow their rules. I know your anger makes lights die." Annie's jaw clenched. Aizawa's eyes flicked to the emergency lights. The voice went on, almost gentle. "I also know you care about children." Annie's stomach dropped. That was the hook, not home. Kids. "Don't," Annie said. Voice low. The voice sighed like Annie had disappointed it. "I did not cause harm tonight," it said. "This was a demonstration, a reminder. I can reach you. I can reach UA." Annie's glow rose without permission. The emergency lights flickered. Annie forced it down with a shaking breath. "What do you want?" she demanded. The voice sounded pleased. "A small favor." Annie's mouth tightened. "No," the voice chuckled. "You did not let me finish." Annie's eyes burned. "I don't care." The voice stayed calm. "During the next conflict, you will stand near a device my people carry. You will power it for 10 seconds. You will do nothing else." Hawks muttered. 10 seconds is forever." The voice continued. "And in return, I will open a door for you. Back to your world." Annie's stomach twisted so hard she felt sick. 10 seconds. Powering a device. That sounded small. That sounded like a trap that would kill someone. "No," Annie said again, firmer. The voice became a little colder. "You will refuse the chance to go home?" Annie's voice shook, but she held it. "I will refuse to help you hurt people." A pause. Then the calm voice said, "Very well." Annie's chest tightened. "Don't act like you're the one choosing." The voice chuckled again. "I always choose." Annie's hands clenched. "Who are you?" The voice didn't answer directly. Instead, it offered a new truth, like a gift with sharp edges. "In your world," it said. "What did they call you?" Annie froze. Hawks' eyes narrowed. Aizawa's gaze sharpened. Annie swallowed. "What?" The voice sounded amused. "They called you something bright? Something pretty?" Annie's chest burned. The words sat in her throat like a stone. The voice spoke it anyway, soft and certain. "Starlight." Aizawa's eyebrows twitched. Hawks went still. Annie's breath caught. She had kept that name buried for a reason, because it wasn't just a hero name. It was a brand, a cage, a lie she had once been forced to wear. Annie's voice came out rough. "Don't say that." The voice was calm. "I say what I want." Annie's glow flared, stronger now, making the emergency lights flicker wildly. Aizawa stepped closer. "Annie." Annie forced herself to breathe again. The voice continued, colder now. "You took my toys. I will take yours." Annie's stomach dropped. What does that mean? The voice didn't raise volume. It didn't need to. "It means," it said, "that your friends will suffer if you refuse me." Annie's hands shook. Her eyes flicked to Aizawa, then to Hawks. Friends. She hadn't even admitted that word yet. The voice sighed, almost bored. "Consider my offer. 10 seconds. A door home." Then the call ended. The phone screen went dark. The lights in the dorm clicked back on like nothing had happened. Annie stood there, frozen, with power buzzing under her skin and fear sitting heavy in her ribs. Hawks spoke first, voice tight. "Okay, that was definitely all for one." Annie looked at him. "You know him?" Hawks nodded once. "Everyone knows the name." Aizawa's voice was flat but hard. "He got inside our security," Annie whispered. "He called me Starlight." Hawks's eyes softened a fraction. "So that's your hero name?" Annie's mouth tightened. It was. Aizawa watched her closely. "Do you want us to know more?" Annie stared at the floor. Then she said it in simple pieces, because that was all she could do without breaking. "In my world, they sold heroes," she said. "They made me a symbol for money. They called me Starlight because it sounded clean." Her voice shook. I fought back. "I'm not going back to being that." Aizawa nodded once, like he had just locked something into place. "Then we won't let them make you that here." Annie looked up, eyes burning. "He said he'll take my friends." Hawks exhaled. "Then we make sure he can't." Aizawa's gaze went sharp. "We plan." And for the first time since she arrived, Annie didn't feel like she was waiting alone in the dark. Planning at UA wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. It was maps and lists and schedules. It was Nezu with a pen, drawing arrows like he was playing a game that decided lives. It was Hawks pulling up info from streets, rooftops, shadows. It was Aizawa pointing at weak spots and saying, "No, that's where they'll hit." It was All Might standing nearby with a smile that looked strong and a body that Annie could now see was carrying something heavy. Annie sat at the table and listened. The plan was simple in idea and hard in execution. They would bait the League. They would use something the League wanted, a portable power convoy with big transformer units and battery packs. But it would be a trap. The convoy wouldn't be carrying real city grid power. It would be carrying dedicated, isolated units that could feed Annie without risking hospitals or trains. Engineers would reroute systems so critical areas were protected. Annie wouldn't have to choose between fighting and saving the power grid. They were removing the moral trap. Annie stared at the map. "So, you're building me a safe outlet?" Nezu nodded. "Precisely." Hawks smirked. "A hero-grade charging station." Annie didn't laugh. She just said, "Good." Aizawa pointed at a marked area near the docks. "Open space, fewer civilians, plenty of escape routes if things go wrong." All Might's voice came warm. "And if civilians appear, we prioritize rescue." Annie nodded. "Always." Nezu looked at Annie. "There is another important point." Annie's stomach tightened. "What?" Nezu's eyes stayed calm. "All for One offered you something. A way home. He will attempt to pressure you again." Annie's jaw clenched. "I'm not taking his deal." Nezu nodded. "Good. But he may attempt to make you look guilty anyway." Hawks added, "He'll try to make it seem like you helped him, even if you didn't." Annie's chest tightened. That was the worst kind of fight. "Not fists. Stories." Aizawa's voice was flat. "So we make the story harder to twist." Annie frowned. "How?" Aizawa looked at her. "By being clear, by being consistent, by having witnesses you trust." Annie's eyes flicked to the door, and the students waiting outside. Izuku, Todoroki, even Bakugo pacing like a caged animal. Annie hesitated. "You're not bringing kids into this." All Might stepped forward, voice firm. "They are training to be heroes, but you are correct. We do not use them as bait." Izuku stepped in anyway, shoulders squared, eyes earnest. "We want to help." Annie stared at him. "This isn't a school drill." Izuku swallowed. "I know." Todoroki's voice was calm. "If All for One targets you, he targets the people around you. We're already in it." Bakugo crossed his arms. I'm not hiding while the rest of you play secret agent." Annie looked at Aizawa. "No." Aizawa's eyes narrowed at the students. "You will not be on the front line." Bakugo bristled. "Then why bring us at all?" Aizawa's voice didn't change. "Because you will help evacuate and contain. You will follow orders." Bakugo looked like he wanted to argue. Then he clenched his teeth and said, "Fine." Annie watched him, surprised. Izuku glanced at Annie, then spoke carefully. "And Annie." Annie looked at him. Izuku's voice softened. "If they called you Starlight, and you hate that name because of what it meant, you don't have to let them use it against you." Annie's throat tightened. She hadn't told Izuku everything, but he understood enough. Annie nodded once. "Maybe." Hawks grinned. "Or you could steal it back." Annie shot him a look. Hawks lifted his hands. "Just saying." Nezu tapped the map. "We proceed tonight." Annie's stomach tightened. Tonight. Okay, she could do tonight. The docks were cold at night. Big cranes stood like giant skeletons. The water below was black and moving. The wind cut through clothing. The convoy rolled in slowly. Trucks carrying insulated transformer units. Large battery crates with warning labels. At a distance, it looked real. Up close, it was a careful lie. Annie stood near the main transformer truck. Her hood was up. Her hands were in her pockets. She didn't glow. Not yet. Aizawa stood nearby, scarf loose, eyes scanning. Hawks hovered high above, feathers spread out in a wide net, ready to cut cameras or carry civilians if needed. Izuku and Todoroki were farther back with emergency teams, ready to freeze water, build walls, or lift debris. Bakugo was there too, but under strict watch, grumbling in silence. All Might stood at the far end of the dock, not close enough to be the first target, but close enough to move if the situation collapsed. Annie didn't like seeing him there, because she had noticed the small strain in his breathing lately, and she could tell he was hiding it from the kids. The wind rattled a hanging chain. Then the air shifted. Annie felt it like a cold finger down her spine. A dark fog rolled in between stacked containers. Hawks's voice crackled in Annie's earpiece. "Warp signature. Kurogiri." Aizawa's voice came calm. "Positions." Annie's heart hammered. The fog thickened and a warp gate opened. Then another. From one gate, Shigaraki stepped out, hands twitching, eyes hungry. From another, Nomu. From another, a group of tech-equipped fighters with cases. Annie's jaw tightened. "Quiet tools," Hawks muttered. Shigaraki's eyes locked on Annie immediately. He smiled like a kid seeing a new toy. "There," he said in English, clearer now. "Starlight." Annie flinched at the name, not because it scared her, because it made her angry. The transformer truck's lights flickered. Annie forced herself to breathe. Aizawa stepped forward. "Tamura Shigaraki, leave." Shigaraki laughed. "No." He pointed at Annie. "He told me you'd shine. He told me you'd hate it." Annie's glow rose just a little, like a warning. Hawk's voice was low. "Don't let him steer you." Annie clenched her jaw. "I know." Shigaraki rushed forward. Annie didn't rush back. She stepped sideways and fired a tight concussive burst at the ground in front of him, cracking the pavement into a ridge. Shigaraki jumped, landing on the ridge like it was nothing. Aizawa's eyes narrowed, and his quirk hit Shigaraki. For a split second, Shigaraki's movement slowed. Annie used that split second to flash, small, sharp, into Shigaraki's face. Shigaraki flinched and turned his head. Izuku surged forward like a green streak, stopping short of contact, and slammed his foot down to create a shockwave that pushed Shigaraki back without touching him. Todoroki threw up an ice wall between Shigaraki and the convoy, forcing the fight lane to widen. Bakugo grinned despite himself. Okay. Aizawa snapped, "Stay on task." Bakugo clicked his tongue and moved back to guard the emergency teams. Shigaraki shook his head, smiling wider. Teamwork. Cute. A warp gate opened behind Annie. Annie spun. She couldn't let it pull her in. She snapped her hand out and blasted into the fog, distorting the gate's edge. Hawk's feathers slammed into the gate too, like pins into fabric. Aizawa's scarf whipped around Annie's waist and tugged her back 2 steps, keeping her away from the opening. Annie inhaled hard. "Thanks." Aizawa didn't answer. He just kept staring, blinking as little as possible. Then the tech fighters moved. They weren't aiming at Aizawa. They weren't aiming at Hawks. They aimed at Annie's transformer truck. 2 of them sprinted with devices that hummed like angry bees. Annie's eyes widened. "EMP again." Hawks's voice sharpened. "They want to cut you off and label it your fault." Annie's chest tightened. So that was the plan. Trap her in darkness. Force a blackout. Blame her. Shigaraki rushed again, trying to close the distance while she was distracted. Izuku moved to intercept, but Shigaraki swung wide, throwing dust and broken gravel to fill the air. Annie's light would reflect off it. Annie didn't flash big. She did something else. She reached behind herself and drew power from the transformer in a steady, controlled stream. Her glow rose, not wild, not exploding, like a bright lamp turned up slowly. Then she aimed her light low, behind Shigaraki, so his own dust cast his shadow forward. It made his outline clear without blinding her. Annie fired a concussive burst at Shigaraki's feet. Shigaraki stumbled back. Izuku surged forward, grabbed a container edge, and swung himself high to kick a flying Nomu away from the emergency teams. Todoroki froze the ground in front of the EMP runners, making them slide and lose speed. One tech fighter recovered and threw a device like a grenade. It clanged against the transformer truck and stuck there with a magnetic snap. Annie's eyes widened. "Get it off!" Aizawa's scarf shot out and yanked the device free. But the device hummed louder in the air. Aizawa's eyes narrowed. "It's trying to pull power." Annie's stomach dropped. It wasn't just an EMP, it was a siphon, a tool designed to drink her light and store it. Hawks cursed. "They're harvesting you." Shigaraki laughed like it was the funniest thing he'd ever heard. "He wants your shine." Annie's anger spiked. Lights on the dock flickered. Annie forced the anger into focus, like squeezing it into a tight box. "No," she said, voice low. "Nobody owns it." She stepped forward and reached for the humming device, not with her hands, with her power. She fed it. Just a little. The device's hum rose, excited. Then Annie changed the flow. She sent a sharp, grounded surge into it, like forcing water through a pipe too fast. The device sparked. Smoke spit out. It died. Hawks whistled. "Nice." Shigaraki's smile twitched, annoyed now. Kurogiri opened 3 warp gates at once, trying to overwhelm the team. Aizawa's scarf snapped, closing one angle. Hawk's feathers slammed into another gate, blocking it like a shield. Todoroki raised an ice ramp, forcing a gate to open into a wall instead of open space. Izuku moved like a blur, keeping Shigaraki away from any clean touch range. But Shigaraki wasn't stupid. He stopped trying to win with speed. He tried to win with fear. He looked past Annie, past Aizawa, toward the emergency teams, toward the students. He grinned. Taking toys. Annie's chest went cold. She launched upward with a burst under her feet, floating over the lane like a glowing guard tower. "Don't you dare," she said, voice shaking with fury. Shigaraki lunged toward the emergency line anyway. Izuku moved to block. Shigaraki feinted left, then right. His hand brushed the ground. Decay spread like a crack through stone, racing toward the ice barrier Todoroki made. Todoroki's eyes widened, and he threw fire to cut the decay's path, burning the ground to force a break. It worked, but the heat wave hit the air like a slap. Civilians, dock workers who hadn't evacuated fast enough, stumbled back in panic. Annie saw one of them trip near the edge of the dock, water below, black and cold. Annie's stomach dropped. She shot down fast, caught the man by the back of his jacket, and pulled him away from the edge with a controlled burst. The man gasped, eyes wide. Annie didn't stop to talk. She shoved him toward safety and turned back. Shigaraki had used that moment to slip past Izuku and close in. Too close. Annie's heart hammered. Aizawa's scarf snapped toward Shigaraki's arm. But Kurogiri opened a gate between the scarf and Shigaraki, swallowing the scarf's path. Aizawa cursed under his breath, rare for him. Shigaraki reached for Annie. Annie's mind screamed, "Don't let him touch you." She did the only smart thing. She didn't try to outpunch him. She changed the space. She flashed, bright, sudden, straight up into the sky. The dock lit like daylight for 1 second. Every shadow vanished. Shigaraki flinched. In that flinch, Annie fired a blast at the ground between them, turning the pavement into a crater that dropped Shigaraki's footing. He fell forward. Izuku slammed in from the side, shoulder first, knocking Shigaraki away without letting any skin touch. Aizawa's quirk hit Shigaraki again. For 1 heartbeat, Shigaraki's movement stalled. Annie saw it. She saw the opening, and she used it. Not to kill, not to ruin, to end the lane. She pulled power from the transformer truck in a controlled surge, building a bright charge in her hands. Then she released a wide, concussive wave aimed at empty container stacks behind Shigaraki. The wave hit the stacks and knocked them down like dominoes, into a barrier pile that blocked the direct path to the emergency line. Metal crashed. Dust rose. The fight lane was cut off. Shigaraki stared at the new wall of fallen containers, blinking like he was annoyed by reality itself. Then he laughed, breathy and angry. "You learn fast," he said. Annie's voice was low. "I had to." Kurogiri's fog thickened. Hawks's voice came tight. "More movement? Something big is coming." A warp gate opened wider than the others. The air pressure changed. Annie's skin prickled. A calm presence slid through the fog like a shadow wearing a crown. Not a body, not fully. A projection. A voice. All for one's voice, smooth as ever, filled the docks without shouting. "Good evening," it said. Annie's stomach dropped. Shigaraki's posture shifted, like a child standing straighter when a parent enters the room. "All for one," Hawks muttered. Aizawa's eyes narrowed, anger cold in his gaze. Annie stood still, glow steady. The voice spoke to Annie like it was speaking to a friend. "Starlight," it said again, savoring the name. "You refuse me." Annie's jaw clenched. "Stop calling me that." The voice chuckled. "Why? It fits you." Annie's hands shook. She forced them steady. "It's not yours," the voice sighed. 10 seconds, Annie. A door home." Annie stared into the fog where the presents hung. "You'll hurt people if I help you." The voice sounded almost amused. "People get hurt either way." Annie's chest burned. "No." A pause. Then the voice became colder. "Then I will take what you have built here." Annie's eyes flicked toward the students and emergency teams behind the barrier. Her heart pounded. And then, All Might moved. He stepped forward into the open lane, between Annie and the fog. His smile was there. But it looked different now. Not for cameras, for courage. "Your threats end here," All Might said, voice loud enough to cut through the wind. The fog shifted. The voice chuckled. All Might, still smiling, still pretending. Annie's eyes tightened. She watched All Might's shoulders. She saw the small strain, But he didn't step back. He stood anyway. Annie felt something in her chest tighten and warm at the same time. This is what a symbol is supposed to be. Not a brand, a choice. All for One's voice spoke again. I do not need to win tonight. The fog thickened. Kurogiri opened gates. Shigaraki backed toward them, still laughing. Next time, Shigaraki called, eyes on Annie, we'll bring better toys. Hawks shot forward, feathers snapping, trying to stop the retreat. Aizawa lunged, scarf whipping, but warp gates were made for escape. Shigaraki and the remaining fighters vanished into fog. The projection presence faded like smoke. And All for One's voice left one last gift behind. A soft, cruel sentence. You can stay, it said, but you will never be safe. Then the fog was gone. The dock lights steadied. Wind filled the silence. Annie stood there, breathing hard, glow fading down as she stopped drawing power. Her knees felt weak, not from the fight, from the pressure, from knowing how close this had been to tragedy. Izuku ran up, face sweaty and worried. Annie, are you? Annie nodded once. I'm okay. Todoroki arrived, calm as ever, but his eyes were sharper than usual. They retreated. Hawks landed with a heavy exhale. Yeah, and they learned. Aizawa looked at the destroyed siphon device pieces on the ground. We learned too. All Might turned toward Annie. For a moment, he looked like he wanted to say something comforting. Then he caught himself and chose honesty instead. You did not give in, he said softly. That took strength. Annie's throat tightened. She nodded once, eyes burning. Then she heard it. Phones. Cameras. Dock workers filming. Emergency staff whispering. The story was already being built again. Annie's stomach clenched. Hawks leaned close. They're going to spin it. Aizawa's voice was flat. Let them try. Annie stared at the crowd. She remembered the name All for One had thrown at her. Starlight. A weapon. A hook. A trap. Or a thing she could take back. She took a slow breath. Then she stepped forward toward the cameras. Aizawa's head snapped. Annie! Annie didn't look back. I'm done letting them decide my name. Hawks muttered. Oh boy. Annie raised her hands, palms open, not glowing, not threatening. She spoke in clear English first, knowing translation would come later. My name is Annie January, she said. The crowd quieted, phones steady. Annie continued, voice firm. In my world, they called me Starlight. She swallowed hard, forcing herself not to flinch at the word. I hated that name, she said simply, because people used it to control me. The crowd murmured. Annie kept going. I did not come here to be famous. I did not come here to break your city. I came here by accident. She pointed behind her, toward the emergency teams. Tonight, people were almost hurt. Heroes stopped that. Students helped. Pros helped. We worked together. Her voice tightened. Villains want to use me. The system wants to label me. I won't let either side own me. A few lights along the dock flickered. Annie breathed, steadying herself. I will follow safety rules, she said. I will not patrol alone. I will not risk hospitals. I will do rescue work. And I will tell the truth when I see lies. She lowered her hands. That's all. She stepped back. Hawks stared at her like she had jumped off a cliff and landed fine. Well, you just dropped a bomb, Annie muttered. No, I dropped a sentence. Aizawa's eyes studied her. That was risky. Annie nodded. I know. All Might's smile returned. Small, real. But it was brave. Annie looked at him, then away. Don't make it a slogan. All Might chuckled softly. I will try. As the teams moved out and the trucks rolled away, Annie felt the city around her a little differently. Not like a stage, not like a cage, like a place that could still change. Behind them, far away, Director Keto watched the broadcast on a screen in a quiet car. She didn't smile. She didn't frown. She simply said, "To no one." So she chose her own story. Then she looked out at the city lights and added softly, "Interesting." Weeks later, the routine settled into something that almost felt normal. Annie trained. She patrolled with pro teams. She did rescue drills with students. She learned more Japanese words than she wanted to admit. She still caused lights to die when she got angry. But now, when a lamp popped, a student would just sigh and say, "Annie's mad again," and keep walking. The fear was fading. Not everywhere. Not for everyone. But enough. One evening, Annie stood on the UA rooftop alone. The sky was clear. The city lights spread out in the distance, bright and steady. Annie rested her hands on the railing and watched without taking. That had become her new practice. To look at power without grabbing it. To exist near light without being controlled by it. Footsteps came behind her. Annie didn't turn fast. She didn't need to. She knew the weight of the steps now. All Might stopped a few feet away. "May I join you?" he asked. Annie nodded. "Sure." He stepped beside her and looked out at the city. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then All Might said quietly, "You did something important at the docks." Annie didn't look at him. "I didn't give in." All Might nodded. "Yes. And you also showed people that a hero can speak without permission." Annie let out a slow breath. "In my world, speaking without permission got you punished." All Might's smile faded slightly. His voice stayed warm. "In any world, it can." Annie glanced at him. "Then why do it?" All Might looked out at the city lights. "Because if heroes only act when approved, then villains and fearful people decide the future." Annie studied his profile. She could still see it. The small strain behind the smile, the weight behind the strength. She spoke softly. "Being a symbol looks exhausting." All Might chuckled once, then grew quiet again. "It can be." Annie nodded. "I don't want to be a symbol." All Might turned to her. His eyes were kind. "Then don't be." Annie blinked. "It's not that simple." All Might's voice was calm. "It is simple. It is not easy." Annie looked down at her hands. "They called me Starlight," she said, "and they used that name like a leash." All Might nodded slowly. "And you took it back." Annie swallowed. "Maybe." All Might smiled again, small and real. "You did." They stood in silence again. Below, the city kept moving. Cars, trains, lights. A soft wind pushed Annie's hair back. Then another set of footsteps rushed onto the roof. Izuku appeared, breathless, holding a phone up like a prize. "Annie," he said. "All Might. Can I get a picture? Just for us. Not for news, I swear." Annie stared at him. Then she sighed. "Fine. 1. Izuku grinned and held the phone up, trying to fit them in frame. Annie leaned in slightly, awkward, not sure what to do with her face. All Might smiled naturally. Izuku tapped the button. The phone screen went black. Izuku blinked. "Huh?" He tapped it again. Nothing. Annie stared at the dead screen. Then she covered her face with one hand. "Oh my." All Might chuckled. Izuku looked horrified. "Did I break it?" Annie lowered her hand and let out a real laugh, short, surprised, and honest. "No," she said. "That's just me." Izuku stared, then laughed too, half relieved. "It's the Annie warning." Annie shook her head, still smiling. "Yeah. Sorry." All Might's voice was warm. "It seems your light has a sense of timing." Annie looked out at the city again, smile fading into something calmer. "I'm still not home," she said quietly. All Might nodded. I know. Annie's eyes stayed on the distance. But I'm not alone. All Might's smile softened. No, you are not. The rooftop light behind them flickered once, then steadied. Annie breathed in. She breathed out. And for the first time in a long time, the brightness didn't feel like a cage. It felt like a choice. A simple, steady thing she could carry into tomorrow.